easily and brought him to Austin for questioning. Randy and Tim shared what they knew with Rangers Boyd and Bird. After that, Randy took Tim to the houseman's house. Once they were inside and assured the worried attorneys that everything was okay, Randy left to talk to his wife about something important. Andy and Patty stopped him and invited him into her office, shutting the door behind them. Jimmy told Tim to meet him in the kitchen, carried Tim's small bag to his room, and went back to cooking. He asked Tim about his day, and as Tim shared, Jimmy shook his head in disbelief at what he heard. Suddenly, they heard a door open, and a cheerful voice called, "I'm here! Where is everyone?" Jimmy replied, "In here," while Tim quickly hid behind the door. The lovely science teacher came into the kitchen wearing her work outfit, a nice dress and low heels. She asked Jimmy, "Why is there a sheriff's car outside?" Jimmy smiled, and Tim surprised her by jumping out. She gasped and then laughed when she saw Tim smiling at her. "You're home! Oh my goodness, it's so good to see you up and about. How are you?" she exclaimed. "Good enough to be out," he said, still holding her in a friendly hug. "And it's nice to see you in something comfy. The last time I saw you." Jeannie poked him playfully and told him to be quiet while glancing at Jimmy. "See, Tim, I would have chosen something different," Jimmy chimed in. "Sure, she looks great now. She'd look good in anything, but I still have daydreams of that electric blue dress and high heels." "You never mentioned those daydreams when I wore that dress, Mr. Houseman?" Patty shot back with a playful tone. "That's because I knew I'd see it on the floor soon enough. With Jeannie, it's just my imagination," Jimmy replied, walking closer to Patty. "You better stop while you're ahead. Now I understand why I felt a bit overwhelmed last night," Patty said with a mock-serious expression, though a smile was on her lips. Alan and Randy had come into the kitchen too, both laughing. Alan added, "She certainly leaves an impression wherever she goes. Chad and I talked about it after we left the hospital, but I can't repeat what we said or what I imagined last night." "Unfortunately, I missed seeing that," Randy said, "but the nurses had plenty to share about it. I'm not sure a couple of them didn't imagine things after she left last night." Jeannie's face and neck got redder with each nice word. As she rested her head on Tim's chest, she turned almost purple. "Maybe they're right, Jeannie. You should go get ready and wear that blue dress for dinner," Tim said earnestly. She frowned and looked up at him, ready to respond, but Patty jumped in. "I think that's a great idea. Will dinner be ready by 7, Master Chef Jacques?" He nodded, and the girls linked arms, swaying out of the room together. The men watched them closely, and Jimmy said, "We've done it now, boys. Patty loves a challenge. It's going to be amazing, so get ready. Randy, why don't you call your wife and ask her to dress up and join us for dinner? I've cooked plenty." Randy looked worried. The joy of the moment faded with his wife's mention. "3 don't think that's a good idea. We have some issues and need to talk." "Do you think a nice meal will make the talk harder?" Alan asked. "I'd think spending time with new friends and having a drink or two might make it easier. She really loves you and seems upset about everything. You can leave your patrol car here and pick it up in the morning, or take it home, and we can return your wife's car early tomorrow." Randy hesitated, but then decided. "Can I use the phone in the office?" Jimmy nodded, and Randy went to call his wife about the invitation. When he was gone, Tim turned to Alan. "So, he's a client, so I can't share details, but let's say he really hopes things will look a certain way. She's the innocent person who was scared and taken advantage of by the bad sheriff. If she can convince him that's the truth and promises to always be honest, she might keep her husband and family. That's just my opinion." Sadness filled Tim. He excused himself to get ready for dinner, thinking about how his own marriage didn't have that chance. He faced divorce, maybe a difficult custody battle, and a life away from the person he thought he would grow old with. There were no easy answers for him. Not being able to change his bandages with one hand, Tim settled for a quick shave, washing up with a cloth and putting on tan slacks and a green sweater. He joined the other 3 men in the kitchen and gladly accepted a cold beer. The beef bourguignon was almost done, but the ladies weren't ready yet, so they stood around chatting while they waited. When the doorbell rang, Randy began to answer it, but Jimmy urged him to let him greet the guest instead. Jimmy returned with a beautiful young woman around 5'9", with long brown hair, a warm complexion, and bright blue eyes. She wore jeans and a sweater and heels that added to her height. She seemed so young and innocent that Tim felt compassion for her and for Randy. He hoped she had been tricked and mistreated and, unlike his wife, was unhappy about her situation. This made Tim more determined to bring those responsible to justice, and to do it quickly. When Tim was introduced, he noticed the woman stiffen and glance away, feeling guilty. He realized she must have connected him to his wife, with whom she had shared some intimate moments on camera. Tim greeted her warmly, offering a gentle hug and a kind smile when she stepped back. Her expression softened slightly, as if she hoped he did not know the details, but she still seemed tense. After a brief exchange of greetings and warm hugs in the Texas style, she returned to her husband, clinging to his arm. Randy smiled at her, but it was clear he was also struggling. His body was tense and his lips were tight. Patty and Jeannie walked in next, lightening the mood in the kitchen. They looked lovely in their snug jeans and V-neck sweaters, similar to Jennifer's outfit. They rushed to meet her, introduced themselves, complimented her looks, and asked about her children. Their chat became lively as she shared stories about her 2 daughters. Meanwhile, Tim pulled on Randy's shirt sleeve, signaling him to follow him into the living room. "We can all see how stressed you are, Randy, and if we can, I know your wife notices too. Let me give you some advice that is worth a lot. Trust her. Yes, she made a mistake by not telling you, but I believe she truly loves you. Karen mentioned that your wife followed the sheriff's orders reluctantly and with many tears. You should listen to her story, assess it carefully, and if you believe her, consider forgiving her. Encourage her to share everything that worries her and work on rebuilding her trust in you. Neither of us did anything wrong, but it seems we have not been able to earn our wives' complete trust and confidence, which might have kept them safe. I doubt I'll have the chance, but you still can. Clear the air, forgive her, and help her trust you fully." Randy's face revealed his uncertainty, but he promised Tim that he would give her a chance to explain before making any decisions. They returned to the kitchen with Tim's hand on Randy's shoulder, both smiling. Jennifer, who had looked worried, now seemed more at ease and joined in the talk. Master Chef Jacques announced that dinner was ready and invited everyone to the big table. They sat down as couples, with Jeannie next to Tim. The meal was tasty, and the dessert, apple tart tatine made by Patty, was amazing. Most of them enjoyed the fine wine, chatting happily, except for Randy and Tim. Randy skipped the wine because he needed to drive his wife home and have an important talk that could change their lives and their children's lives too. Tim chose not to drink because his doctors advised against mixing alcohol with his medication, wanting to stay sharp during this stressful time. While the group was still sitting and talking at the table, suddenly they heard loud noises outside. Randy quickly shouted for the women to get down on the floor, crawl into the kitchen, and hide in the pantry. He took out his gun and told the other men to arm themselves if they had weapons. Tim crawled to the closet where he had kept a rifle, a shotgun, a pistol, and some ammunition. As he crawled back with the shotgun and ammo in front of him, the rifle over his shoulder, and the pistol in his right hand, bullets shattered the glass in the front door and the kitchen windows. Jimmy had crawled into the pantry to get a shotgun he had hidden there, and found out that the women had gone downstairs to the cellar. Tim handed the shotgun to Alan and found a spot between the dining and living rooms where he could see both the kitchen and the front doors. He called out to Jimmy to keep an eye on the back door, which was locked and secured. When they saw a flash from a gun and heard more bullets hitting the kitchen windows, Tim fired back with his rifle, and Randy shot at the flashes. Tim then turned his focus back to the front door and noticed someone trying to force it open. He aimed and fired twice near the door frame. He heard a yelp, so he shot twice more. They stayed alert, ready with their guns and scanning the area, but no more shots were fired, and there were no attempts to break in. During the chaos, Randy had called for help using his radio, and soon they heard sirens approaching. He updated them on the situation, and within moments, spotlights moved around the yard, followed by a knock at the door. Randy went to answer the door with his gun safely in its holster while Tim kept his rifle ready just in case. 2 police officers entered, talking with Randy, while 2 more came through the side door into the kitchen. Tim placed his rifle on the floor and stood up, his hands level with his shoulders. Alan did the same with his shotgun. The women came out of the pantry, surprising the 2 officers. Tim quickly explained that the women had been there since the shooting began. The local police said sorry for aiming their guns at them. The women smiled and thanked them for arriving so quickly to help. A security guard had been hurt. It wasn't serious, but he was an off-duty police officer, and the police were not happy about it. Tim knew this would make the search for the suspects even more urgent. He stepped aside, thinking about whether he wanted them caught or dealt with in a more permanent way. Jimmy caused quite a scene when he came back from the back, holding his shotgun, but Randy handled the situation well, and the detective who arrived asked everyone to gather in the living room. They were invited to share what had happened. Their lawyers, Patty and Alan, shared the story, including how Randy brought Tim from the hospital and was invited to stay for dinner. The detective raised a hand, looking worried. He asked Randy if they were the targets of an attempted murder earlier that day, to which Randy confirmed they were. The detective looked even more concerned. "So, these people are really serious about getting you too, right? Do you know who they are?" Everyone turned to Tim, who looked at his three lawyers. "Should one of you?" Alan said Tim should answer that question. Tim shared a brief overview of what had happened since the blizzard, leaving out anything about Jennifer's past. When he mentioned the films Karen had been in, he watched her closely. Jennifer turned pale and seemed unsteady, glancing at her husband. He comforted her with an arm around her shoulders, but kept his gaze on Tim. After sharing the story and answering questions, the tired group said goodbye to the officers and welcomed those left on guard duty. Jimmy gave one of them the key to the kitchen door for bathroom access, and the group returned to the living room. Jennifer called her neighbor in Jonestown, who was watching her children, and asked if she could keep them overnight. The neighbor agreed. Alan decided to stay overnight at the Houseman's home, freeing up one of the 5 bedrooms for the Jacksons. Jimmy offered to show them to their room. Randy followed while Alan, Jeannie, and Patty headed to their own rooms. Tim stayed back and signaled for Jennifer to come over. She looked worried, watching her husband. "I think you know I'm Karen's husband, but I mean you no harm. Jennifer, tonight and tomorrow are very important for you. Be honest with Randy, explain everything, and answer his questions completely. If you do, I think everything will be fine." She looked like she might cry as she quietly said, "If I do, he will leave me. He can't ever know what happened." "Jennifer, he's a police officer. He knows more than you realize. I'm warning you, be honest," Tim said urgently, guiding her toward their assigned bedroom before heading into his own. He watched her enter her room with nervousness and wished someone could have talked to his wife when she faced a similar situation. Saturday morning began with the smell of bacon and biscuits. A cheerful blonde burst in, saying, "Time to wake up, sleepyhead. Breakfast is getting cold." Tim jumped out of bed without thinking and only realized he was not dressed when he saw Jeannie's expression. Too late now, he thought, and walked into the bathroom. He looked back and saw Jeannie staring at him. He smiled and asked, "Do you like what you see?" She blushed deeply, turned red from her hair down to her chest, and quickly left the doorway. Tim walked into the kitchen to laughter, and Jeannie turned red again. "What did you do to this sweet girl, you rascal?" Patty asked. "She has been blushing since she came back from waking you up." This made everyone laugh even harder, and Jeannie turned an even deeper shade of red. Tim raised his shoulders and held up his hands. "Me? I was sleeping when someone loudly told me to get up. I got out of bed as ordered and went to the bathroom. She was the one staring at me from the moment I moved until I got to the bathroom." Randy, Jennifer, Alan, Patty, and Jimmy burst into laughter, while Jeannie turned very embarrassed and exclaimed, "I didn't know you would be sleeping without clothes." The laughter echoed as the others nearly fell out of their chairs. Tim looked at Jeannie with mock seriousness and said, "A lady would have turned away. You were staring and everyone could see it. You seem all sweet and shy, but I've learned my lesson." Initially, she buried her head in her arms while everyone else laughed, but then she joined in too. "See? No one here is a true gentleman or lady," Tim said playfully. "If they were, they would have told her not to stare at me like that." "I'm so embarrassed." Jennifer took a sip of her coffee, looked at him, and playfully said, "Well, you don't have anything to be embarrassed about, but I didn't see you without your clothes." Everyone laughed again. Tim dropped his pretended attitude, smiled, kissed Jeannie on the head, and joked, "Fair is fair, you tease." He chuckled when she blushed and went to refill his coffee. Scrambled eggs, bacon, and warm biscuits with butter and peach jam. Someone knows just what I like, Tim said as he filled his plate. It was Jeannie, Patty shared. She got up, made coffee, set the table, and prepared everything to cook. She started when she thought you would wake up and then came to find you because the rest of us are hungry. Or maybe she just wanted to see you without your clothes. Jeannie turned red again, and realizing the teasing would go on until she responded, stood up, walked over to Tim, gave him a playful slap on the behind, smiled at him, and said, "Nice backside." Tim pretended to be shocked. "Just a hunk of meat to you? Well, I want you to look at my face, not just at my body." Everyone laughed. Jeannie playfully hit him again and strutted back to the table, saying, "Stop staring at me." Imitating his kids, Randy said, "Ow! Get a room!" The group cracked up again as Jeannie gave Tim a playful look and sat down. Tim walked to his chair next to her, pulled it out, poked her shoulder, and playfully shook his backside at her face when she turned. He sat down with a serious look. "You two are so funny. You must know each other well to tease like that," Jennifer said with a laugh. Tim was glad to see her lively this morning and noticed Randy looking at her affectionately while she joked. It seemed someone was about to have a happy moment, though his own marriage felt far from it. The conversation was light and easy as they enjoyed their meal and another pot of coffee. Before they started cleaning the table, Jeannie said, "My parents and my older sister Kathy are coming this morning. They want to meet everyone, and then we'll go shopping. Can you all stay until they arrive?" "We will. We're waiting for the repairmen to fix everything," Patty replied. Tim nodded, and the Jacksons silently agreed, exchanging glances like a couple often does. Alan checked his watch. "I need to leave soon." Jeannie touched his arm and said, "Please stay, Alan. I'm glad to introduce you to my big sister. She's been feeling lonely ever since her divorce last year, and I think you might get along well." "Set up," Tim joked, making everyone laugh again. Alan smiled and told Jeannie, "If she looks anything like you, I'm interested." Jeannie replied, "Well, she's taller and prettier than me, but she's been a bit difficult about men since her husband left her." "Sounds like we've both had tough times," Alan remarked. "Looks like this will be fun," Jimmy added with a chuckle. "Hey, if she's divorced and looks better than you, why not set her up with me?" Tim suggested. "I'm almost divorced too. My wife's friends have been giving me a hard time. Maybe we could be good for each other." Jeannie gave Tim a pointed look. "You're not single and you might never be. Alan is." "Why not?" Tim asked. "I've started the divorce process and my lawyers say it'll be quick. I should be free in a few weeks." The laughter around the table grew again. Jeannie playfully lifted her chin and acted aloof. "Remember that girl in the blue dress who stayed with you in the hospital instead of going out with others? You promised her things that you never followed through on, so you're not free yet. After she decides what to do, maybe then you can meet my sister, unless Alan has already taken her." The group burst into laughter, and Tim sighed in defeat. However, his hand playfully inched toward Jeannie. She quickly moved her hands off the table, trying to stop him. Before she could react, his hand reached her thigh, and he teasingly brushed against her. She looked surprised, trying to resist, but also feeling a strange thrill. Remembering their previous moments together made it hard to think clearly. She quickly glanced at the table to see if anyone noticed. Tim seemed distracted, focused on Alan, while Patty and Jennifer exchanged knowing looks with small smiles, creating a mix of laughter and tension in the air. The other two men tried to seem uninterested, but she noticed the smiles on their faces and in their eyes. Tim playfully poked her side, and she let out a soft sound from the sensation. This led to more laughter, with Patty gasping, "Tim, stop teasing her," which made everyone laugh even more. Jeannie felt panic rise, worried that she would get overwhelmed in front of everyone if he didn't stop holding her thigh and poking her. However, she didn't really fight back because it felt too nice to want it to end. Suddenly, Tim casually loosened his hold and started to pull his hand away. Jeannie still held onto his wrist, but as he lifted it, she let go and relaxed back in her chair. Patty couldn't resist teasing her further. "I wish I had a camera, Jeannie. Your expression is, what, exciting maybe? What do you all think?" Jennifer replied, "If he had kept doing that for a few more seconds, exciting would have fit perfectly. But now, I'd say it feels unfulfilled. Alan shifted his focus to Patty when the laughter faded and said, "We better start working on those divorces, Patty. We need to keep our distance until the divorce papers are ready." Jimmy chimed in loudly. "Yeah, we should start locking them in their rooms at night and never leave them alone." Jennifer looked skeptical. She shook her head and said, "You're way too late. The chemistry between those two is intense. Randy, I think we should head home." Everyone at the table laughed, but Patty felt a truth in those words. Tim casually remarked, "It's not a big deal, we just enjoy teasing each other, right, buddy? Besides, after tonight I'm going to save the local authorities and all of you a lot of trouble because I'm heading home. Actually, to my ranch. I have a cozy cabin there, a sturdy foundation, a nice exterior, and a roof on a hill." Alan attempted to argue, but Tim continued. "It's a mile to the main road, and there are 2 locked gates between there and the cabin. I'll bring one of my brother's trained dogs as protection. I'll be ready, and I'll be far enough away from anyone else to avoid any issues. As long as I'm alive, or until these troublemakers aren't, my family and friends are at risk. I refuse to keep putting anyone else in danger. This is my fight." "You promised you would keep up with your workouts, Tim. That was a requirement to leave, and if you don't do this, you might never fully use your arm or leg again. Please stay here with us. The police will watch over us. We'll be safe," Jeannie pleaded. He turned his chair to face Jeannie, took her hands gently, and continued. "There is physical therapy available down there, too. I've used it before, and the therapist is very good and a close friend. They gave me a list of exercises, and I've been doing them long enough to know how. I've thought a lot about this, Jeannie, and talked it over with someone I trust. Last night showed that they won't stop trying, no matter how safe we think we are. Some police may get hurt, my family may be at risk, you could be in danger, and those injuries would be my fault. I can't live with that. Down there I have family and friends who know the woods well. Some are military veterans, others are skilled hunters, and they are all good shots. Everyone knows me, and strangers stand out, so they'll be noticed. Once my story gets out, there will be about 4,000 people looking out for me and keeping an eye out for those troublemakers. Trust me, we will all be safer when I'm down there. However, that doesn't mean you will all be completely safe. Your ex still wants to hurt you, and when I leave, they might take one of my friends to find out where I've gone. Randy and Jennifer are still in danger from the crooked sheriff. The more I learn, the more I believe there are powerful people involved that we don't know about. Karen is going to be questioned by 2 Texas Rangers and a senior state trooper about anyone she might have seen or heard about. The same officers will talk to others who may have information, including those from the Williamson County Sheriff's Department. I'll be watching some movies while I'm keeping to myself that might help me understand more. I'll be in touch with Ranger Boyd by phone and radio, and we'll keep each other updated. We need to end this soon, and we need to take action quickly. I don't like being a target, especially not putting others at risk too, like the people at this table. This is for the best. And before you ask, yes, I will have protection, and I will be well guarded. They might not be in a marked police car, but they will be alert and ready to act." Jeannie began to protest again, but Randy interrupted. "He's right. We can't keep him safe here like they can out in the country. He and the Rangers have come up with a good plan, and I believe it's the best choice. If he stays here and we don't catch them, eventually they will find a way to ambush him. Down there, he is with his friends in a place he knows well. I can see he has good friends who care about him and are ready to help because they owe him and appreciate him. It's not completely safe, but it's better than just staying here without protection." Jeannie looked unsure and a bit upset. She wanted to argue, but then the doorbell rang. She jumped up. "Oh no, it's my family!" "Go get ready. We will greet them and keep them entertained while you do," Patty said. Jeannie dashed back to her room. The group stood at the doorway, which was being fixed by workers. The Hildebrands were a nice couple in their 40s. They were with a strong, red-haired woman in her 20s. You could see Jeannie and her mom, Amelia. She was about 5'4", lovely and friendly. Daddy Joe was over 6 feet tall, slim, with a military posture. Sister Kathy looked like a more grown-up version of Jeannie and their mom. She was around 5'6" inches or 5'7", curvy, with red hair instead of blonde, but still very pretty. Amelia and Kathy wore stylish jeans and sweaters. Joe was dressed in khaki pants and a polo shirt. Jimmy explained Jeannie's absence, and they introduced themselves, with Tim being the last one introduced. The family had warm smiles during the introductions, as you would expect from people from San Antonio. When Tim was introduced, the friendly greetings turned into hugs, kisses on the cheek, and gratitude for helping their daughter, along with careful glances. He humbly said, "All I did know, all we did," pointing to Jimmy, Alan, and Patty, "was support Jeannie in getting away from a bad situation. She is the brave one." Mom looked at him thoughtfully and said clearly that Jeannie told them a very different story, and they trusted their daughter. With a smile, she pulled his arm close and gave him another kiss on the cheek, then thanked each person in the group. Not seeing Jeannie, she joked with a big smile, "So our youngest daughter isn't ready yet? How unusual, right?" Her husband and daughter laughed. The others looked confused. Sister Kathy saw their puzzled expressions and explained, "You look confused. Jeannie was always the best dressed and looked perfect wherever she went. She was always late. I promise, even when she was busy with sports, every date had to wait 15 minutes for her to arrive. We called her Princess Jeannie." Patty turned to the others and answered, "No, she seems different now. She dresses casually, uses little makeup, and is usually ready on time." She wasn't ready because they had a late breakfast and talked a bit too long. "Tim, you work with her, what do you think?" "She's one of the most genuine, humble, and caring people I know," Tim said, sounding a little defensive. "I've seen her dressed up once or twice, and she looked amazing. But most of the time, she wears simple clothes, uses minimal makeup, and styles her hair nicely for being a teacher and a dance coach. She's been more of the girl-next-door type than a princess when I see her." Her sister seemed surprised. Their mom looked skeptical, and Dad was proud. "See, I told you she had changed," he said. "Oh, Dad, she will always be your little princess," Kathy said, a little envious. "Speaking of," Alan said, glancing toward the hallway. Jeannie appeared, clearly happy to see her family. She wore a navy jumpsuit with 3/4 sleeves and comfy shoes. Her hair was neat, and she had on a simple heart necklace with matching earrings. The jumpsuit showed off her figure nicely, and the light makeup highlighted her bright green eyes, but she looked more like a friendly neighbor than a spoiled princess. The three women happily hugged, kissed, and complimented each other. Then, Jeannie went to her dad, who looked thrilled to see her. Tim thought she was definitely Daddy's girl, and noticed how they seemed to share a close bond. He smiled at their happiness. While they were hugging, Patty told Mom Hildebrand that they were inviting them for dinner. She mentioned that Jimmy and Tim would be grilling steak, shrimp, and various vegetables, followed by her famous chocolate cake. Mom assured her they would be there and asked what time to come. Patty said any time would work as long as they gave a heads up. Jeannie turned back to them, telling Patty and Jimmy that they would return by 4:30. She thanked the Jacksons for their company and hoped to see them again. Then she asked Alan if he could join them and show them the new stores he had mentioned. Even though they had talked about it, Alan blushed. Kathy smiled at her younger sister and shook her head, aware this was a little plan to bring them together, but she liked Alan's charm enough to support it. Jeannie eagerly led her family and Alan to the car, but then remembered she had left her purse inside and hurried back to the door. She stepped inside, picked up her purse from the chair by the door, and looked at Tim with a playful smile. "You better be here when I get back, or I'll come find you, okay?" she said gently, before lightly touching his cheek and promising a kiss. With that, she laughed and ran back to the car. Tim exchanged light jokes with Jennifer and Randy about their close friendship, while their lawyers pretended not to notice. The Jacksons had to leave but promised to stay in touch. They called Tim outside, where Randy put an arm around his shoulders and Jennifer hugged him tightly. "We want to thank you for the great advice you gave us yesterday," Randy started. "I began to understand how you must feel, and I was in a really bad place. But after hearing my partner talk, I realized that she needs my support and guidance to deal with tough situations. She's beautiful, and there will always be people who want to take advantage of that. We'll work on that together, and we want you to be part of our lives. You've quickly become someone I trust, and Jennifer feels the same way." Jennifer hugged him so tightly that he felt a twinge of pain from an old injury, but he didn't mind and hugged her back. "Thank you, Tim. I was scared when I first heard your name yesterday, but you've turned out to be my best friend besides Randy." She loosened her grip a bit and looked at him with watery eyes. "There are a few things I think you should know. I know Karen was under pressure to make those films just like I was. But by the time I met her, she seemed to be in charge. She told me she was planning to leave that life after this movie, ready to focus on being a wonderful wife and mother because she truly loves you and your sons. I could hear the honesty in her voice. But then the filming started, and it became overwhelming. The script had to change, and I felt completely defeated. I hated how things played out. Karen seemed to manage it all better, and she was kind to me and understood my feelings. She's the only one I wouldn't blame. As I told Randy, the only moments I found comfort were with her. I'm not someone who usually feels that way, but being with her was special, in a way. I think everyone feels a unique energy around her, and I believe you do too. I know she sincerely wants to return to being a mother and wife. But can she truly leave that other life behind? Can she really stop being with other people? I wasn't the only one, and there were many others involved. She only had about 10-12 days, but she acted like she had done this before. I can see the sadness in your eyes, and I'm really sorry. I owe my second chance with Randy to you, and I just can't stand the thought of her hurting you again. I know you will make the right choice. Remember, you can call us anytime if you need help, okay? The rest of the day passed in a blur. There were workers everywhere, and Jimmy and Patty were showing them what needed to be done, like adding locks and improving the security system for the doors and windows. Tim stayed busy. He split some wood for the fire and stacked it in the big fire pit on the patio, but mostly he did his exercises while thinking about the situation he found himself in. When he lit the fire at 3:45 to let it burn down, he had made some important decisions that he needed to discuss later. Kathy was holding Alan's arm as they walked into the backyard, following her parents to where Tim was getting ready to cook steaks. "Son, Jeannie told us everything during lunch. Thank you for helping her make the choice to leave Larry and for taking care of our little girl while she healed. Sir, your daughter did much more for me and took better care of me when I was hurt than I did for her," Tim replied modestly. "I am the one who should thank her, and I appreciate your family for raising such a kind person." Jimmy had come over from the cooking area with grilled vegetables, and Mr. Hildebrand asked, "What really happened last night? We saw the repairmen when we arrived, and some are still here, but Jeannie was hiding and doesn't really know. Alan suggested we ask you. So what happened?" Jimmy explained the events of the previous day, starting with Tim being released from the hospital. He talked about the sheriff being involved, the work with the Rangers and DPS, the plan that didn't work out, and the events of last night. Tim was described in a heroic way, which made Jeannie's parents look at him in a new light. "You lead a very interesting life for a school teacher, don't you, Tim?" asked her mom. "Goodness, I've never heard of such things." "Why do they want to hurt you, young man?" her dad asked. "This doesn't make sense." Tim calmly replied, "I'll let my lawyers explain what happened, so I don't say anything I shouldn't. Jimmy Allen, you can share as much as you think is necessary. I want to be open with Jeannie's family. All I ask is that you tell me how you like your steaks, and then please move over to the patio. I lived it. I don't want to hear it again." Jeannie joined her family on the patio while Jimmy and Alan shared a troubling story. Patty set up the things they needed on the big table and listened, occasionally adding details for the other women. Tim focused on cooking the vegetables and steaks. For Joe, the order was medium, but the three women preferred theirs well done. Tim looked at them carefully and said firmly, "I'll cook them just right. Then you can finish cooking them your way if you want. I won't ruin a good steak." Joe laughed and said, "See, I tried to tell you." Kathy rolled her eyes but agreed to try a medium steak, saying she would cook it more if she needed to. Jeannie and Amelia also agreed, so Tim returned to the grill. The other three men wanted their steaks medium rare, and Patty wanted hers medium, so Tim adjusted the cooking times. When the steaks were ready, everyone took theirs at the same time after serving vegetables on their plates. Since the Hildebrands were driving back to San Antonio, they chose tea, sweet or unsweet, served in tall glasses full of ice. The lack of alcohol didn't stop Kathy from making a face when she cut into her steak. "Ew, it's so juicy." Tim looked at her and said, "Of course it is. Have you ever heard someone say they want a dry steak? No way. Try it. If you don't like it, you can cook it longer on the grill." Jeannie and her mom quickly said they would try it. Everyone watched as they cut their steaks and took a bite, feeling a bit nervous. Amelia was the first to react, looking surprised as she said, "Wow, I didn't know a steak could taste this good. What did you do, Tim? He smiled and replied, I seasoned it well, cooked it just right, and put it on your plate, Amelia. Just right? She asked, eyes wide. Yes, for those who ordered medium well, I made it medium. Warm pink center, keeping the natural juices but no blood. Jeannie, Kathy, how's your steak? I would have said perfectly if you hadn't told me it was just medium, Kathy responded, looking shocked at how it looked. Tim turned to Jeannie, who smiled and said sweetly, It's perfect, Tim. The best I've ever had. Thank you for showing us something new about steak today. Tim noticed Papa Joe looking at them curiously before the topic changed, and everyone started eating again. The conversation stayed lively throughout the meal, and no one wanted it to end, even as time went by. It had become cooler outside, so they moved into the living room to keep chatting. The Hildebrands brought 2 bottles of nice wine to share and thought everyone should have a drink before heading back to SA. Tim thanked them but chose to open a cold Lone Star beer instead, saying it felt wrong to waste good wine on his simple taste. After finishing one drink and pouring another, the doorbell rang. Jimmy picked up his new gun from under the counter by the door. Alan and Tim stood ready on either side of the hallway. They opened the closet doors, stepped partially inside, and raised their hidden rifles. Jimmy peered through the peephole, nodded to the others, and opened the door. Tim glanced back into the living room and saw Mr. Hildebrand watching closely while the women kept talking. Ranger Jim Boyd walked in. He smiled when he saw Alan and Tim ready, and Jimmy holding a gun, but then his expression turned serious as he said he had important news for all of them. He was invited to sit down in the living room, where everyone had stopped talking to listen to the ranger. After introductions, he paused, unsure if he should continue in front of Jeannie's parents. Tim encouraged him to go ahead since they already knew some of the story, so he agreed and shared surprising news. We caught one of the men from last night. The shout you heard when Tim fired was because a bullet grazed his side, and he sought medical help. The police informed us about him. He wasn't one of the individuals we were looking for, but his story was suspicious, so we took him in for questioning. He kept saying he was in pain, but no one could find his pain medication. Eventually, he broke down and started to explain what happened. Luckily, the trooper who drove him found the pain pills in his car. After getting a pill, he talked until he shared everything he knew. The ranger looked at Tim and Jeannie, who were sitting closely together, and asked if they were sure they wanted him to continue in front of everyone. He said the news was personal. They talked it over and decided they wanted everyone to hear, so he revealed that the attack was meant to harm Tim and to take Jeannie. The attackers were part of a local gang trying to collect money that had been offered for them. The condition for Jeannie was that she had to be captured safely, while the goal for Tim was much more serious. A stunned silence filled the room. Tim shared their surprise, saying, I have a strong feeling about who the unknown people are, but a bounty? Really? Have we gone back in time to 1882? What on earth? The ranger let them express their feelings for a moment before saying, Tim, Jeannie, this changes everything. We need to keep you both safe while the search is happening. We can't protect you both while you continue your daily lives. Trying to do that puts you, your loved ones, and our officers at risk. Jeannie, you need to stop teaching right away. You won't be able to return until this is sorted out. Tim, we'll help you with what you need, but we must take you both to a safe place where they can't find you. We need to do this quickly, like by tomorrow. Tim, we are also going to keep your wife, kids, and her parents safe because there seems to be a threat against her too. They will be moved to a different location, and you will also be relocated somewhere safe around here. Tim's mind was racing as the ranger explained everything, and he noticed that Joe Hildebrand was also thinking hard, sitting straight on the edge of his chair, listening closely. Tim could see a mix of disbelief and worry on the faces of everyone else, except Jeannie. She looked determined. Tim turned to Ranger Boyd and began to share his idea. Jim, I have a different suggestion. You keep Jeannie safe, and keep her out of sight. Contact the sheriff of my home county. Tell him what's going on and ask if he minds if I stay at the ranch. If he's okay with it, I'll leave tomorrow morning and arrive by early afternoon. My brother will bring some groceries and other supplies when he comes to take care of the cattle. I'll use the back roads to get there and no one will know I'm around. I'll be safe, Jeannie will be safe, and no one will have to risk their life watching over me. It's only a matter of time before they come after me unless I take a big step like this. We both know that anyone skilled enough can take me out from far away, but out there, I have the advantage with good visibility, dogs for protection, and helpful neighbors. Plus, I can handle myself if they do find me. Feeling he had made a strong case, Tim leaned back, but Jeannie interrupted. No, that doesn't make sense. I need to be wherever you are, and we need protection from the police. I know you. You're not planning to hide. You're thinking of turning this into a trap to attract them, and then it could end badly. Tim responded without hesitation. Honey, I get where you're coming from, but these people won't stop. They aren't playing by the rules. They have given up on acting decently. Do you believe they want to keep you safe because Larry wants to say sorry? Does JW really just want to talk to Karen? We both know their true intentions. Do you want to risk becoming part of something you don't want? If not, you should accept protective custody and let me handle things my way. In the wild, I'm as deadly as a rattlesnake. Here in town, I'm an easy target. I need to return home, and you need to be safe. That way we both can be better off. Before Jeannie could respond, her father spoke up. You're both partly right and wrong. Tim is right that you shouldn't expect normal behavior from these people. They've turned dangerous, like a pack of wolves on the hunt. Trying to escape from them won't work forever. At some point, you have to stand up to them. I'm sorry, Ranger, but I think you understand that. The Ranger nodded, looking down, then back up. I've explained my position and made an offer. When seemingly ordinary people start to act cruelly, our usual methods don't really help. Joe Hildebrand cut in again. Tim, I agree with you, but Jeannie is also right. If she stays with you, it makes it harder for them to get to either of you. You may not know me, but I took the time to learn about you because of what Jeannie said. I know what you're thinking, and if I had done that with Larry, we wouldn't be here. I found out that you're more than just a typical college athlete, teacher, or father, aren't you? Turning to include everyone, Joe continued. Los Ratones have a legendary status in the brush country, almost like Robin Hood and his merry men. In that area, Tim, you are like Robin Hood, a champion of the people, leader of the Ratones de la Brasada, or the Tasajillo Gang, as they were originally called. I'm sure you could easily gather a group of skilled friends to support you. They owe you that much. Yes, I saw the official report, which somehow missed connecting the missing drug dealers and their ties to the fire at the remote house they lived in. It stated that no one had ever stayed there, and the surrounding buildings were never used to shelter the girls who went missing. Then, miraculously, those girls returned the next day, but they could hardly remember anything other than being kept in a dark place for a long time. No remains were ever discovered, but after that, the sale of harmful drugs stopped, and no more girls went missing. There had been similar cases of people going missing in 2 nearby counties, and those areas had also faced several unfortunate fires caused by storms. Thankfully, the missing girls returned, but they had trouble remembering what happened due to the effects of drugs. When you came home after the game that year, the sheriffs thought it was just a coincidence, and they weren't very worried about the sudden departure of the drug dealers. Joe looked around at Tim, Ranger Boyd, and the others listening to him before he continued. My wife knows this, but my daughters don't. I served in the Special Forces during the Vietnam War. I've seen and done things I prefer not to discuss, but those experiences tell me we won't be able to keep Jeannie, Tim, his sons, Karen, and her family, and maybe Jennifer and Randy safe from these dangerous people without taking some unusual steps. Here's my plan. Law enforcement will protect Amelia, Kathy, Alan, Jimmy, Patty, and anyone else they see as in danger. Jeannie and I will go with Tim to his ranch to stay safe, but we will be armed and ready to defend ourselves against anyone who might want to harm us. The Ranger will keep everyone informed about what is happening as things develop. If things are still not resolved in 10 days, we will come together again to discuss our next steps. Ranger, do you have anything to say? I can't officially support any plan that removes law enforcement's primary role in keeping those at risk safe. It's true that we are somewhat limited by the laws that the suspects are not, but we as an organization can't approve of any actions that resemble taking the law into our own hands. That said, if you say the 3 of you are going to wait at a remote ranch until law enforcement captures those looking to harm you, I can't stop you. Is that clear enough? Tim and Joe exchanged looks and both nodded. Joe then said to his family, "Given what we have learned tonight, I think it's better for us to spend the night here if there is space, or nearby if not. This will give the ranger time to make any needed plans. I also suggest that tomorrow night, Tim, Jeannie, and I go to the ranch quietly, while the rest of you head to the safe place with the ranger. Tim's family will make sure we have what we need, and my team will provide the necessary protective gear and equipment. We will all check in from time to time, using the ranger unless he thinks it's safe to talk directly. We need to be careful not to accidentally give away anyone's location." "Do you have any thoughts or changes to suggest about this plan?" asked the captain. "Not from me, Captain Hildebrand," Tim said with a smile. Joe looked confused until Tim clarified. "You don't think you're the only one who looks into important people before meeting them, do you?" Jeannie had been quiet, but now she spoke up. With a sparkle in her eyes, she suggested, "I think we should find a car they don't know about that suits the situation we'll face in South Texas and switch it out along the way." "Dad, do you have something like that in your collection or at one of the dealerships?" Dad smiled at her and said it was a great idea, and he actually had something available. Tim jumped in, saying, "I have the ranch covered. I know the right car for getting around on the ranch, on roads or in trails. We need something that can keep up in a fast chase and also drive on dirt roads. It would be great if you have that." Joe nodded and said, "I've got that covered." They solved the issue of needing an extra bedroom by having Kathy share with Jeannie. Kathy smiled, winked at Alan, and said, "All right, but Jeannie better not snore. I'll be there in a bit, baby sis." Jeannie replied, "We all know who the real snorer is, older sister, and it isn't me." After saying their goodbyes and good nights, everyone but Alan and Kathy went to their rooms. As Jeannie and Tim walked down the hall to their rooms, Tim quietly joked that if Kathy snored or took too much space and disturbed Jeannie, Kathy could move to his room. Jeannie elbowed him lightly and said that would never happen. Tim turned on the coffee maker as soon as he woke up and found Mr. Hildebrand dressed and sitting on the porch reading the Austin American Statesman. He brought out a cup of black coffee with a spoonful of sugar, remembering how Jeannie said he liked it. They enjoyed the beautiful sunrise in silence, with the newspaper resting on the table. "How will you let your brothers know?" Hildebrand asked after a few quiet moments. "I won't. A friend will," Tim replied. "It's the simplest phone tree. Since each person only has one number and no names, but by nightfall, everyone will know when and where to meet. Is Monday night at 9 too soon for you?" "No, that works perfectly," the captain replied. "We can talk about the details on the way down tonight, explore the area tomorrow, and get everything ready. I don't know how your followers will find out where we are going, but if we can hold off for 2 days before they show up, we will be safer." "I'm not sure we can promise 2 days. That feels like another risk. Jim, the ranger, won't tell anyone about us or send the group to the safe houses until Monday. If he is correct that there is a leak in the police, they will know then. We can't say how fast they will reach the ranch or when they will send help." "They won't send someone right away," Joe said confidently. "Larry wants to be there when Jeannie is caught, and they all want to see what happens to you." They heard Jeannie talking to someone in the kitchen, and soon she came out with coffee. She wore comfortable pants and a light jacket, her hair in a ponytail and no makeup, but Tim thought she looked great. Her dad seemed happy to see her and greeted her with a cheerful smile. She leaned over to give Tim a quick kiss on the cheek. "So, did you sleep well, sweetie?" Dad asked. "Kathy didn't keep you awake, did she?" "No, not at all. I didn't hear a thing," she said playfully, glancing at Tim. "She didn't take up the bed. It felt like I was alone." Tim understood her meaning and winked back. Dad just smiled. Patty, Jimmy, Kathy, and Alan joined them outside, and Patty suggested they move to the large table on the patio. "I made us some more coffee," Patty said. "And I was up early making donuts," Jimmy added with a grin. "I made some apple fritters and bear claws, too. They should be ready soon." "I hope you made enough for the police who kept watch all night," Patty said. "Of course. I made enough for them and their replacements who come in at 7. Mr. Woe is bringing them at 6:45. Oops, I might have said too much." Jimmy laughed. "Yeah, right. Like anyone at this table believes you woke up at 4 to make donuts," Alan joked. "I'm pretty sure we would have smelled it even if you were quiet." Tim enjoyed the friendly atmosphere among these smart and nice adults. For a moment he thought about his wonderful wife. and how well she would fit in if only things were different. He pushed the sadness aside, forced a smile, and looked around. No one noticed except Jeannie, whose expression reflected his hidden feelings. He smiled and winked at her, and she returned the smile. The two police officers who had just finished their shift joined them on the patio. The new team each received a half-dozen donuts and holes to enjoy while on duty. Patty cooked some ham to go with the sweet dishes and brought a gallon of milk to the table. She nodded to Tim and joked, "Someone here can't have breakfast without meat and milk." It turned out that everyone enjoyed meat and milk with their sweets, so she added those to her shopping list. After breakfast, Tim called Ranger Boyd to confirm their plans and to make sure that Karen's phone was only monitored by the police. At 9 p.m., Ranger Byrd would take Karen and her family to a safe place, while Boyd would move everyone at the Houseman's home. Joe, Jeannie, and Tim would leave and take a long route to San Antonio when it got dark, aiming to leave San Antonio for Tim's ranch right at 9 p.m. This would give them time to shake off anyone following them, switch vehicles, and get clothes for Mr. Hildebrand before heading out. Since both safe houses were in the countryside, everyone was told to wear jeans and boots. Without being able to go home for supplies, Jeannie and her family, along with Alan, were taken to a nearby Western store to buy what they might need. Tim went home with another officer to pick up additional supplies. After getting his clothes and gear, Tim asked the officer to take him to a payphone outside a convenience store. He called Karen, and the boys were excited to talk to him. They tried to fill him in on everything that had happened since he saw them at the hospital. Eventually, Karen took the phone after their grandmother gave them a treat to quiet them down, and Tim discussed the plan with her. She seemed scared and unsure, so he asked to speak with her dad. He was calm about the need to hide and said they would wait for the ranger to contact them. Karen asked where he would be hiding. Tim replied that he couldn't say, and then he asked if she could think of anything that might help keep them safe. She thought for a moment, but couldn't remember anything useful. After hanging up, Tim was taken back to the Houseman's home, where he got back to watching videos. Though the videos were unsettling, he learned which high school students were involved in unfortunate activities and why one babysitter wouldn't give a statement. He also identified 2 local officials they hadn't known about and noticed 2 police officers who had arrived at a party under false pretenses but didn't leave without involvement. He quickly called Jim Boyd and asked him to come over right away. The shoppers returned to the Houseman's home at 4 p.m., where they found Jimmy had a bunch of catfish and hush puppies ready to fry, and Patty had all the side dishes prepared. Tim and Jim Boyd stayed in the study to continue watching videos until they were called for dinner at 6. They looked worried when they came out. The 3 lawyers took them aside, and Jeannie approached them. "What's wrong?" Alan asked. "You all seem upset. Let's just say we have a clearer idea of where the leaks are, why the suspects have been able to stay hidden, and we understand the crimes better now," the ranger answered. Tim shook his head, eyes closed, and said, "I had no idea. I can't believe I worked with those people. Some of them are supposed to be teachers. No, they are pretending to be teachers while they're really harmful." "Should we put the food in the oven and talk or eat first?" Patty asked. "It sounds like we need to rethink what we're doing." "Let's eat," Jim said firmly, "and we can think about the new information a bit before changing our plans. I think we can still move forward, but we need to be smart about who we tell. Anyway, let's enjoy our meal first, and then we can discuss it." They pushed aside their worries and enjoyed a nice meal together. "I can't believe it, but we feel like old friends, not just new people," Kathy said after Alan made a joke that had them all laughing. "We will definitely feel that way after being together in this safe house for days or weeks," Patty responded. That dampened the cheerful mood and reminded them of the real danger outside. Ranger Boyd called them to a serious meeting in the living room to rethink their plans based on the new information he provided. When he named some of the students, Jeannie looked pale. When he named the elected officials, her dad turned red with anger and silently fumed. After Boyd spoke with the ranger who was looking out for Tim's sons and Karen's family, they decided to delay evacuations until midnight, and they would go to different safe houses than planned. Tim, Jeannie, and Joe would sneak out the back, climb over the fence, and head west down the alley to a simple car waiting for them. They would drive to Joe's dealership, switch cars, then go to his home to get some important things before heading south. Tim called his in-laws' house again. He talked lovingly with his kids for 20 minutes and then, with reluctance, with his wife. The more he saw on the news, the more frustrated he felt with her, but he wanted to give her one last chance to share anything that might help keep them safe. "Have you thought of anything else to tell me, the sheriff? Or Ranger Byrd? We need to hurry. We're in real danger. Any names or other information would help." Karen paused but shook her head, saying she had nothing else to add. "Karen, can you think of any other teachers, students, police officers, or officials involved? There must be someone else, someone in a position of power who is warning the criminals about our plans. I know you want to keep your family and the kids safe, so please share what you know." There was silence for almost a minute before she said, "I want to talk to Ranger Byrd. I'm not comfortable speaking with you because I suspect these phone lines are being monitored." "Thank you," Tim replied. "Take good care of our sons and follow the advice you've been given. I will contact you as soon as this is over." At 11:55, they were on I-35 South in a 1978 Dodge Ram Charger 4X4 with a strong 440 cubic inch engine. It had steel bumpers and a winch on the front, raised a bit, riding on tough all-weather tires that Joe claimed were nearly puncture-proof. The ride was noisy with the tires and engine, but Joe handled it well. They took some routes to see if they were being followed, but didn't notice any signs of someone trailing them. Joe filled the gas tank in the last town before turning onto the country roads leading to their destination. They made a quick stop for everyone to use the restrooms, and Tim grabbed some coffee since it was after 1:30 a.m. After driving about a mile on the county road, they encountered a long curve. There were piles of pavement for road work on the right side, so Tim had Joe pull over and wait for 10 minutes to ensure no one was following. When it seemed safe, they proceeded to the ranch. They left the paved road and traveled the last 2 miles on a sandy road that needed some fixing. They reached the ranch entrance at the halfway point. Tim opened and locked 2 gates that blocked the road to the house. Then he slipped out of his shoes and climbed onto the hood of the Ram Charger in his socks to scan for any lights signaling someone might be following them. Content that they were alone, they drove toward the house. Upon reaching the first hill, they spotted the ranch house on the taller hill. A nightlight by the water tank was on, but no other lights were visible. They parked in the brush and approached the house quietly with their rifles and pistols ready. While Jeannie and Tim opened the house, Joe ran back to the SUV. They checked the refrigerator and pantry, which were well stocked by Nate, Tim's brother. They also looked over the bed linens to make sure they were clean, checking for any unwanted pests. Joe parked by the back door, and they brought in their clothes, weapons, and equipment, setting up their sleeping areas. Jeannie would stay in the bedroom, which had a full bathroom and a space for getting ready. Tim and Joe would sleep in the bunk beds against the south wall and share a small bathroom with a shower. Tired from the previous day, they slept soundly until 8 the next morning. Tim woke up first, used the bathroom, and made a pot of coffee, which woke Jeannie and her father. They enjoyed breakfast with Tim's eggs, bacon, and biscuits from a mix while they discussed their plans for the day. Tim noticed that Jeannie seemed more reserved about her feelings when her dad was around, but she still gave him small touches and glances when he wasn't looking. They got dressed for the outdoors, planning to explore the area around the house first, and then check how strangers might get onto the ranch. Jeannie was eager to look at the house inside and out, and asked many questions about the old furniture, which Tim explained had come from his grandparents and great-grandparents. Joe wondered if the ranch truly belonged to Tim, or if it was still in the family name. To satisfy both Jeannie and her dad, Tim explained everything in detail. This place had been a getaway for his grandparents before they decided to share their land among their family. They made that choice based on their difficulties with the legal system and taxes after their parents passed away, following advice from a shared lawyer. Both families owned a lot of land, which didn't earn much money most years, but the government valued it highly for tax purposes. By giving the land in smaller pieces to their heirs, they avoided taxes that could force the heirs to sell what they inherited. Only a greedy government couldn't see the irony in this decision, but his grandparents understood it. They began passing down property to their son and daughter and grandchildren before turning 60. The ranch was Tim's inheritance, given to him in parts over 6 years by his loving grandparents. They gifted him the most they could each year, and he paid for the rest through money from selling cattle, even though most of the cattle still belonged to them. His grandparents wanted to keep the land large enough for raising cattle, so Tim's brother and sister received similar gifts from their mother's side of the family. His brother Nathaniel, often called Nate, got the land nearest to town. It was 400 acres, but much of it was improved pasture and farmland, along with a nice family house. He and his high school sweetheart and now wife Linda loved the rolling hills, the rich farmland, and the big 2-story, 4-bedroom house they planned to fill with children. Sister Janice, known as Jan, chose a 500-acre ranch about 10 miles from town along the Nueces River. It had irrigation rights, a working irrigation system, and fertile fields. Her husband, Gary, already owned a big cattle and horse ranch in nearby Dimmitt County. They lived there but grew hay to feed his special quarter horses at their river property. Tim, their youngest grandchild, wanted the most remote and least developed ranch for himself while he was still in high school. He got his friends to help him out with work on the 800-acre ranch in exchange for hunting, fishing, and camping. Tim spent a lot of his free time making small improvements. He taught himself how to operate a front loader, a backhoe, and a small bulldozer, along with how to plow and manage the ranch tractor. Neighbors lent him other equipment in return for his help on their ranches, and gave him lessons before he used their machines. Tim and his friends were well liked by the neighbors because they were always ready to lend a hand with roundups and ranch tasks for a little pay and good food. He became especially close to an old man, Mr. Thurman, who lived on the land to the east, across the county lane. Mr. Thurman had never married and had no close family, so he often asked Tim for help. The bulldozer belonged to Mr. Thurman, and he had Tim clear paths and improve water sources on his land before letting him work on his own property. Driving the bulldozer was a new adventure for Tim, very different from working with the tractor. There were many levers and pedals to learn, but he picked it up quickly with Mr. Thurman's guidance. Land in the area had been in families for many years, making it hard to find more. Tim asked his neighbors to give him a chance if they ever wanted to sell nearby land. After 2 years, Mr. Thurman decided to take him up on that offer. He owned 320 acres with a good water source along a creek and a small 1-bedroom house. Mr. Thurman had cancer and knew he didn't have much longer to live. He didn't want to be alone, so he planned to move to a nursing home that provided hospice care in his final days. Mr. Thurman's asking price was very low, and Tim told him so. He offered a higher amount, but Mr. Thurman insisted that he would leave it to Tim in his will. Instead, he asked Tim and his friends to be his pallbearers and say a few words for him before he was laid to rest. Tim bought the land with the college money he didn't need because of his football scholarship. He paid cash and received a nice discount by handling the legal fees and title insurance all at once. Tim paid just over $50 for each acre of land. Plus, he took on some extra roles, like being a pallbearer and a speaker at a service. However, according to the will, he also received a few items, including a Caterpillar vehicle, a pickup truck, a tractor, and more money than he spent on the land. After sharing his story, they walked around the edge of the open area to see if there was anything that could be used for hiding. The 7 acres included a well, a small pump shed, a concrete water storage trough, a small holding pen made of pipes, and a cattle dipping area left over from times when worms harmed many livestock. That area was now fenced, but rainwater collected there regularly, and Tim took care to add pesticide to control mosquito larvae. They made a plan that if there was an attack, one sharpshooter would protect the open spaces around the building so the attackers couldn't use them to hide while aiming at the house. Thankfully, the house sat on a hill, raised about a foot above the ground, making it harder for someone to hit it directly. Any shots fired at it would have to go uphill, so they were more likely to hit the ceiling than anyone inside. As they returned to the house, they discussed where they could see to defend themselves if attacked. Joe spent a while looking at the walls and windows. The walls were made of concrete blocks with a thick layer of stone on the outside, which Joe said would protect them well. He appreciated that there were very few windows on the west side, only a small one in the bathroom. In South Texas, people often left out windows on that side to avoid heat from the sun. There were also high sliding windows on the south wall that let in light but kept the house cooler. Any bullets fired through those would just hit the top of the interior walls without causing much harm. On the north wall, which had the chimney for the fireplace, there was just one window over the sink. Although this was a point of concern, it was positioned high enough above the floor that it was less of a target. Joe was worried about the windows on the east side where the screened porch was. The windows there were closer to the floor, so anyone standing inside could be at risk if shots were fired through them. Since the county road was to the east, both entrances to the ranch needed careful attention. With their positions decided, they climbed into Joe's truck and drove to the mesquite pens, where cattle were gathered during branding and shipping. This area was located in the southeast corner of the ranch. A ranch worker and his family lived in a wooden house near the well, southeast of the pens and barns. Daniel and Dora had worked for the family for many years, and their kids were friends with Tim and his siblings. Though the kids were grown and had moved away, the Mendez family was considered part of their own. Joe and Jeannie admired the stacked mesquite pens and shipping chutes, as well as the palm trees beside the pens that provided shade for a large table and benches. There were 2 barbecue pits nearby, and an old chuck wagon was kept under a tin roof next to the bigger barn. Tim gave them a quick tour and some history, leading them to the barn. After looking at the chuck wagon and learning about how food was served from it during spring gatherings, Tim opened the barn's big doors to show them a vehicle covered by a tarp. With excitement, Tim removed the tarp to reveal his cherished 1948 Dodge Power Wagon WDX quad cab. The truck was painted battleship gray with a matching gray interior. It was raised 6 inches and had all-terrain tires for 4-wheel drive, powered by a 3.9-liter Cummins diesel engine. The classic Power Wagon looked strong and ready for adventure. Tim invited them to open the 4 doors and see the well-kept upholstery and interior, which he had fixed up after buying Mr. Thurman's land for a good price. Jeannie was almost speechless, while her dad couldn't stop talking about what he called this amazing truck. He pointed out feature after feature, saying he wouldn't even know how to price it if he tried to sell it, calling it priceless. When Tim mentioned it had less than 20,000 miles, her dad shook his head and said, "Priceless! This is one of a kind. Take care of it and never sell it, because someday it will be worth more than a 3-bedroom house." Still in awe, Jeannie put her arm around Tim's waist, looked up at him and asked, "Can we take it for a ride?" Tim quickly glanced at her dad, who was giving him a careful look at her use of honey. Realizing her slip, Jeannie turned to her dad, stammering, I don't know why I called him that, Dad. I wasn't thinking, it just came out." Her dad's frown deepened for a moment before it turned into laughter. When he felt a bit better, he looked at the unhappy Jeannie and said, "I wanted to see how long you two could keep pretending you're just colleagues, but the look on your faces when you slipped up." He chuckled again and asked, "Did you really think we wouldn't notice? The way you looked and the tone of your voice gave it away the first time you mentioned him, and that was almost 2 years ago. Remember what your mom told you about keeping friends just as friends?" He continued, "That look became more dreamy after he helped you out with your husband. Now let's just say your mom, sister, and I had a talk on the way to Austin. We agreed to let you both keep up your act. Yes, I know your lawyers say you should wait until you're both divorced to show any feelings, but honestly, your spouses already gave up on you when they treated you the way they did. Besides, there's no one here but us, and you're not fooling me, so relax. I don't want to see you two being overly affectionate in front of me, but calling Tim honey is fine." After that, he wrapped Jeannie in his arms, smiled down at her, and kissed her forehead. Her face lit up with joy. Joe smiled at Tim, who looked relieved now, and reached out his hand. Tim took it and was pulled into the hug with Jeannie. She said, "I love having my 2 favorite people here with me. I think we should just stay like this." After a moment, Dad let her go and said, "We still have some work to do, but first I want to explore the rest of this barn and the other buildings. After that, I'd like to take the monster wagon for a spin." Jeannie kept her arm around Tim when he tried to move away, so he led them over to look at the tractor and then opened the tack room. The tack room had a wooden floor raised above the barn's dirt floor. There were a dozen custom saddles sitting on wooden stands, with saddle blankets hanging on a rope across the room and reins hanging on hooks. 4 branding irons hung on nails, and there were several bags of colorful ear tags and a couple of tools on a wooden bench. Jeannie was intrigued by the saddles, examining each one carefully. Joe noticed some cans and asked, "I see a can of kerosene and one labeled burnt oil. What are those for?" "The burnt oil is used on the calf after it's branded to seal the brand and help it heal," Tim explained. "We use kerosene for many things, like starting fires, for lanterns and torches, and to ease the pain from scorpion and wasp bites. Dad is the only supplier who still offers it, but many old ranchers buy it in 5-gallon containers because it has many uses." Jeannie was leaning over to look at another saddle when she asked, "Tim, what does the symbol under each strap holder mean?" "That's the mark the saddle maker uses. Trey Hayward is the best around, and that's how you know it's one of his saddles and not a fake. It's pretty detailed, right?" She nodded and then asked, "Which one belongs to you?" "I have 2 of his and 1 other," Tim said, pointing to 3 saddles next to each other. 2 were the same except for size. "This was my childhood saddle. I got the bigger one when I turned 14. I'm keeping the youth saddle for my kids. See the saddle by the wall? It looks like mine but has silver on the horn. That's my grandfather's. This one is my grandmother's. Those are Mom and Dad's, and these are Daniel and Dora's. The rest are for the ranch. Anyone can use them, but usually they are for my friends or people we hire to help with the cattle. You know, cowhands or cowboys." "But what about this one with all the designs and all-around cowboy on it? Who does it belong to?" Jeannie asked. "That's mine. I won it in high school. It was the only rodeo I ever entered. I like watching rodeos, but I never understood some of the events. I get calf roping, bronc riding, and team roping. We do those on the ranch sometimes, although we try not to raise horses that buck. But I don't get why someone would dive off a moving horse onto a running steer, or why anyone would climb on a bull." Jeannie had moved on to look at 2 other saddles. "Can I use one of these?" she asked eagerly, pointing at 2 fancy saddles made for women. "Honey," he replied with a smile, "you can use any saddle you want. I'm sure my mom and grandmother will let you use theirs after they meet you." "Oh, these are your mom and grandmother's saddles. Maybe I should wait." Tim was trying to reassure her when they walked out of the barn and saw Daniel washing up outside their house. Dora walked toward them with her arms open. "Time, Teo!" she called out joyfully. "We saw the truck on the hill this morning, so we knew you were here. Come, introduce us to your friends and come eat. I made all your favorite dishes." Tim's face brightened as he quickly walked over to her, took her in his arms, and spun her around. Daniel approached with a big smile and gave Tim a friendly pat on the back. Tim hugged him back and called him Tio Daniel, which he said as Don Yell. "Tia Dora, Tio Daniel, this is Jeannie and her dad, Joe Hildebrand." After they finished shaking hands and exchanging greetings, Tim explained, "They are here to help me with a problem, and I'll need your help too. But first, let's eat. Tortillas, beef stew, beans, and Mexican rice. Is that good, Tio?" "Very good, Tia," Tim said happily. Dora laughed and responded, "Great, let's eat." She put her arm around Tim as they walked to their home. "Wow, mijo, where have you been? We missed you," Daniel exclaimed. Tim hugged him too and replied, "It has been way too long. I won't do that again." As they shared the most delicious food I've ever eaten, according to both Jeannie and Joe, the atmosphere was friendly and filled with stories. Tia and Tio updated them about the cattle, the planting of spring crops and local events that had happened and those coming up. Finally, Daniel asked, "What is the problem we can help with, Tio?" Tim started to explain briefly, but Dora wanted to know more. She frowned when she heard about Karen's actions that led to the current issues. When Tim mentioned the injuries from the earlier attack, she let out a Spanish expression of shock. "So that's why you're moving differently and flinch when I hug you. Where were you hurt?" Tim showed her the injuries, and she expressed her anger about the people who hurt him. Daniel, a World War II veteran, listened carefully, and his expression grew serious as Tim spoke. "So, Teo, have you told your brothers?" Tim told him he hadn't because they wanted to assess the situation first. Daniel shook his head. "No, mijo, you need to tell them now. You can use our phone." Tim walked to the phone and called Wildman at his office in New Braunfels. Wildman answered on the second ring, and Tim said, "What's up? How are you?" "Good, good. There's a big party at the Mendez Ranch until tomorrow night. Can you come?" Will paused and replied, "Really? Sure, I'll bring my cousins. What time?" About 7, more or less. It's fine to invite everyone, Tim said. Okay, brother, see you tomorrow, Will replied before hanging up. The plan is set, Tim thought as he returned to everyone. I hope for the best. Jeannie looked at Tim curiously and asked, You speak Spanish? Sure, pretty much everyone here speaks both languages. Or rather, 3, because our main language is Tex-Mex, he said with a smile. They required us to learn 2 foreign languages in high school. Teodora said, Without Timateo's help, my son would have struggled in Spanish and wouldn't have graduated. I don't know where they use that kind of Spanish, but it's not in Texas or Mexico. Daniel asked if the celebration would be in the shed and corral again. Tim confirmed it would be, and Dora told Jeannie she could use some help putting up the lights and decorations. Jeannie quickly said yes, and Dora asked if they could start the next morning around 8:30 if she made breakfast. They all agreed happily. Her cooking was amazing. Tim and Daniel decided they needed to split the cattle between the Thurman pasture on the east and the back quarter on the west. Tim asked who wanted to help gather the cattle this afternoon, and he was glad Jeannie volunteered before the 2 men could answer. She had never talked about being a cowgirl or even riding, but she had been surprising him every day, so why not? Daniel said he would bring the horses to the barn in an hour. Tim turned off the charger and the old power wagon started right up. Jeannie and Dad joined him in the front, and they drove along the ranch roads for an hour, looking for any problems and places to set up defenses. Once the cattle were safely separated on the 320-acre Thurman pasture and the 160-acre western section, they could set up watch points and traps without worrying about the cattle getting hurt. Back at the barn, Tim insisted everyone wear chaps, a jacket, and a hat. Jeannie looked a bit uncomfortable in the outfit, but Tim thought she looked cute. She chose a saddle blanket, reins, and Tim's grandmother's saddle, and then squealed with joy when Daniel offered her the shiny black mare with a white star on her forehead, which they creatively named the Black Mare. Tim helped her get her horse ready, and then he tacked up his favorite mare, Blue. The blue roan was happy to see him, nuzzling his face. He gave her a handful of sweet feed and rubbed her neck before putting on the bridle and saddle. After checking that he was a skilled rider, Daniel mounted Joe, a red quarter horse that was excellent for cutting. He then took the big black stallion, explaining, He needs some exercise. He's getting a bit grumpy. They rode in a large loop around the herd of nearly 100 red Santa Gertrudis cattle, spreading out with Daniel leading, Jeannie on the right side, Joe on the right flank, and Tim on the left flank. The cattle were calm, and the lead longhorn steer quickly followed along as he had been trained to do. The ride was calm, but Jeannie and Joe quickly understood why wearing chaps and jackets is important. As they guided the cattle over the hill toward the ranch house, Tim turned to see his brother's pickup truck arriving on the ranch road. By the time they moved the cattle into the back pasture and secured the gate, the truck was parked behind them, with Nate sitting on the tailgate. Daniel closed the gate as he rode back, and then they headed toward Nate's pickup. Want a cold drink? Nate asked, opening the cooler. Everyone nodded, and Nate pulled out and opened 4 bottles. He looked at Joe and Jeannie and said, Sorry, all I have is Lone Star Red because that's what my little brother and Daniel drink. He got down from the tailgate, took off his hat, introduced himself to Jeannie, and then to Joe, put his hat back on, and handed out the cold drinks. So, Miss Jeannie, are you a cowgirl by trade? Nate asked. She took a long sip of the cold drink, smiled, and said, Actually, this is my first roundup, but I can tell you're teasing me, just like your little brother does. Nate tilted his head and said, You did pretty well. You might want to keep a bit more weight in your stirrups, or you might feel sore tomorrow. Joe grinned. Tim and Daniel laughed, and Jeannie, with a light blush, looked at Nate and replied, I can see you really are Tim's brother. It's the first thing you notice when you arrive. Then she cheerfully added, Thanks for the tip, I definitely wouldn't want that. Nate laughed at her reply and said, Sorry, Miss Jeannie. I didn't expect Tim to bring someone without a sense of humor or confidence to meet our lively family and friends, but I had to check. Even with your cowgirl clothes on, you look quite put together for out here. Jeannie joined the others on the ground, turned away from them, bent over slightly, and asked Tim and Nate, Is everything okay back there? Did I hurt myself? Daniel and Joe burst out laughing. With Jeannie's shape highlighted by the leather chaps, Nate and Tim couldn't help but smile. What do you think, bro? Looks good to me. How about you? Tim asked. Nate tilted his head and said, It's hard to tell from here. How about you come a bit closer, Miss Jeannie? She stepped back a little toward them, stopping just beyond reach, and looked over her shoulder. The brothers leaned in and looked closely. Finally, Nate said, I think you look great, Miss Jeannie, even with all that bouncing. She squirmed playfully and asked, Tim, do you think so too? Well, it might be even better than that, he replied. But yes, I think you still look perfect. However, he added as he reached out, I'd need to take a closer look to be sure. Jeannie quickly stepped away and waved her fingers at him, saying, No touching, I'm a bit sore. She laughed, took a big gulp of her drink, winked at both brothers, and then went back to pet her horse. She got y'all good. Looks like you finally met your match, Daniel said with a smile, and the brothers nodded shyly. Joe chuckled at his daughter's fun spirit and wondered why it had taken her so long to show it. The mood became serious when Nate asked Tim, So I hear there's a party tomorrow evening at Daniel and Dora's, and you're all invited. What are we celebrating? Nate, you don't need to worry about this. You're expecting, and I don't want to. Nate cut him off. What are we celebrating? Linda and I will decide if we want to come after we hear what it is. Tim hesitated a bit before Joe and Jeannie stepped in to share the difficult story. Tim listened quietly as they explained while Nate continued to ask questions. When they were done, Nate placed a hand on Tim's shoulder and said, Wow, I never thought Karen would get mixed up in something like that. You seem to be handling this better than I would expect. Are you okay? Tim looked down and then at Jeannie before saying, I've had a lot of support from friends and some time to think. I won't ever be okay with what she did, and I'm unsure about my boys, but right now I'm focused on keeping Jeannie and myself safe and making sure my sons, Karen, her family, and my lawyers stay out of trouble. As for the party, we will see who is still in and make some plans. If I'm still around after they come looking for us, I'll have to make some tough choices again. For now, I just want to keep everyone safe, and I want to find a way to make things right. I can't promise this will end well. I just want to make sure those who have been after us can't go after anyone else, so you might want to stay out of it. Most of the people involved will remain unnamed, but my brother. They will want to talk to you. You need a good story to explain why you were not here and why you were seen downtown at a restaurant and bar. So where do you think I should go? Nate asked. Everyone important in this county would wonder why I was in town when the Los Ratones and Los Hermanos de la Brasada were dealing with the bad guys. Their opinion of me would matter more than mine or how Linda sees me. You know better than that, so stop it. Have I ever run from a fight? Have I ever let you down? Do you really think I would hide when people are after my little brother? Come on! You can't think that low of me! Tim looked down for a moment, then raised his head, his eyes filled with tears. You know I don't. But the idea of you getting hurt, of your children never knowing their dad, really gets to me. Still, I know you well, so thank you. And I love you. My son will know his father and his uncle. We've faced tough enemies before. We succeeded under your leadership, and we've won a few more since you've been away. Trust our group. We'll take care of you and that lovely lady. Jeannie approached them, tears in her eyes, standing between them as she hugged both. We will be fine, Tim. With you two, Dad, Daniel, and those friends you call brush rats, we are going to handle these troublemakers. Tim jokingly squeezed her shoulder and said, Looks like we're all okay, huh? She stepped back, playfully hit his arm, and said, Let's get back on the horses. I'm ready to ride, and I'll use more support in the stirrups. But you guys are going to stay in front of me the whole time, understand? They took a quick stop by the house, where Nate dropped off food, supplies, and some equipment. He said he got them with cash from a couple of shows upstate and gave a wink. Or maybe they were found when some people ran away from trouble. I can't say for sure. Tim asked if the snakes got all of them, and Nate just shrugged. Joe looked over the gear carefully and said they were top-notch items. He especially liked the shotgun, claiming it would stop anyone coming through a door or window right away. Daniel watched closely. When offered a tool to use, he said he preferred his own and would stick with that. He drove Nate's truck back to the barn so Nate and the others could check out some of the spots and traps discussed by Joe and Tim. When they reached the barn, Dora shouted that Tim had received a call and needed to return it quickly. Tim hurried to the house and dialed the number she had noted. Ranger Jim Boyd, how can I assist you? Tim introduced himself and had a chat that made him thankful Nate was still around. Before hanging up, Tim promised to call back early the morning after the party to make final choices. He returned to the barn, where the horses were being taken care of and cleaned. Joe and Nate looked at him with curiosity. "What's the good news?" Joe asked. The ranger mentioned there are 2 officials elected statewide, a district judge, and 4 more lawmen involved. This includes high-ranking members of the State Highway Patrol and rangers, plus 2 state troopers. He said the governor called it quite a mess when he found out. He also said that nearly everyone involved had issues with minors, but not Karen. However, one person had a connection with both Karen and Jennifer, as did the sheriff, who is already in custody. So now we understand how information was leaking out when the higher-ups were informed. "If that's the good news, what's the bad?" Joe asked. It turns out Benton and Rogers were involved with a client of Benton's who has ties to a Mexican cartel. They are uncertain about the number, but the cartel is supposed to be sending people to help them. He wants to cancel things, but unless there are many well-trained people coming in, I'm inclined to wrap this up sooner rather than later. What do you all think? Joe said he would support Tim's decision, whatever it was. Jeannie mentioned she would support her team, and Daniel shrugged. After some thought, Nate replied, "We don't want trouble with a cartel, but we need to put an end to this. Give me until the party. I'll find out what I can." Nate urged them to continue planning since their situation could change at any moment, and they needed to stay ready. He paused and jokingly commented, "Of course, I wouldn't mind seeing you in a less formal setup." Jeannie reacted with surprise and blushed, playfully hitting him on the shoulder. "Looks like the playful nature runs in your family, too." He laughed, kissed her on the cheek, and said, "You'd fit right in with the Kellys. You can hold your own against our teasing, and not many can." After enjoying carne asada tacos with lettuce, tomatoes, and guacamole at Dora's table, they thanked her for another delicious meal before heading to the house on the hill. The sun was setting in the west, and the evening air was becoming cooler. A cold front had passed through, with another stronger one expected early tomorrow, though both were dry, meaning little chance of rain. Tim carried wood to the fire pit in the yard and started a fire. Then he brought the redwood chairs from the porch and placed them around the fire, making sure to sit upwind. Jeannie had just finished her bath and changed into a cozy navy blue outfit, with a hood and a red tie belt. Tim was still in his dirty jeans and felt he didn't smell the best, but Jeannie didn't seem to mind. She sat down next to him by the fire, cozying up to him. "Dad's in the shower now," she said with a smile. "He wouldn't go in until I was done, so we have a little time to ourselves." Tim warned her about how he smelled after a long day, but she shrugged it off, snuggled close, and gave him a sweet kiss. Tim returned the kiss, wrapping his arms around her, and they sat close by the warmth of the fire, sharing the moment. Jeannie teased him a bit, shifting slightly in his lap, laughing quietly at his worried expression. "Is my ear okay?" Tim asked jokingly after a playful moment. Jeannie smiled, looked at him, and assured him everything was fine. "You're such a worrier," she said with a light-hearted tone, checking his ear just to be sure. "Nope, you're good." Tim let out a small laugh, relieved. "Between the bite and that scream, I thought you broke something. Hopefully Dad's still singing in the shower, or the cows out back might start making noise." They both chuckled together, and Jeannie gave him a playful tap on the shoulder before taking her seat beside him. The fire crackled as the cool night air settled in, and they enjoyed the peaceful moment in each other's company. When she turned around, both Jeannie and Tim saw their dad standing in the doorway with a serious look on his face. Jeannie blushed and stammered, "Dad, you're done with your shower already." "Yes, young lady. I didn't sing in the shower. I bathed, dried off, got dressed, and came out just in time to hear you two playing around," Dad replied. Tim stayed quiet as he noticed a small smile creeping onto Joe's face. He was curious to see how Jeannie would react after getting caught. At 24 and married for 2 years, she was still Daddy's little girl. "Dad, I was just sitting on Tim's lap and we were pretending to be coyotes," she explained hurriedly. Tim tried not to laugh too hard at her amusing excuse, but it was tough. Dad couldn't hold back his laughter at Jeannie's antics. Soon, Tim joined in the laughter as they both found Jeannie's defensive act funny. After a moment, Jeannie laughed too. "Okay, I give up. But you should have told us you were coming out. Don't you know about privacy?" How could you have known if I didn't say anything? Dad said, making Jeannie giggle. She turned back and sat down on Tim's lap again. This time he kept his hands on the arms of the chair, and Jeannie didn't move around as much. They chatted and enjoyed the cozy atmosphere in the dim light, talking about their day and the sounds of nature outside. As night fell, they roasted marshmallows and shared stories about their cattle drive, Nate, and Janice. The laughter continued as they listened to the coyotes calling. Tim helped Jeannie off his lap to grab some marshmallows and forks, then returned with warm chocolate drinks. They savored their treats and admired the stars shining above, clear and bright in the dark sky. At 10 o'clock, they agreed without words to head inside. Tim took his shower and changed clothes while Jeannie went to the bedroom, and Joe climbed into his bunk. As Tim came out of the bathroom, he noticed Joe was lightly snoring. Checking on Jeannie, he found her sleeping as well, her light breathing soothing. They all enjoyed a peaceful night's rest. The delicious smell of coffee, bacon cooking, and biscuits baking woke Tim around 7. Jeannie and Dad were quietly working in the kitchen, chatting softly as they prepared breakfast. Tim tried to sneak quietly into the bathroom, but Jeannie spotted him. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she called out. With one issue settled, he went to the kitchen to accept the cup of coffee Jeannie was holding out for him. Her bright smile brought warmth to the chilly morning, but her playful glance almost made him nervous again. "Dad is taking Dora and me shopping in Laredo for the party tonight. We're leaving at 7:30 and we'll be back after lunch. You don't need to worry about the decorations. Your friends' wives are handling that later this morning, so you have time to move everything out. Oh, and Dora said you should call Nate soon." "Did I sleep for a whole day?" Tim asked, puzzled. "When did all this get planned?" "Dad and I got up at 5:30 and watched the sunrise from the porch. Dora and Daniel came by around 6:15 with the new plan, and here we are. By the way, what about your therapy? I haven't seen you do any. Shouldn't you call for help?" Tim sat quietly, sipping his coffee and enjoying biscuits with gravy, pretending not to hear her. "Tim, can you hear me?" Jeannie called, nudging him gently. He continued eating, looking around and ignoring her. "Tim!" she called again, shaking his arm lightly. Looking down at his food, he mumbled, "A man should be able to enjoy his breakfast before being talked at by his lady, without even a greeting." Joe smiled, and Jeannie frowned as she tried to understand what he had said. When it clicked, she smiled, turned his face towards hers, and kissed him gently. "How are you, darling? And just to be clear, did you just call me your lady?" "Well, I suppose you are my lady. Not every ranch hand can make you laugh like you did last night," Tim responded in his southern drawl. Joe chuckled. Jeannie blushed, playfully hit his shoulder, and exclaimed, "Oh, I'm so sorry," when he flinched. He rubbed his shoulder and said in a childlike voice, "It hurts. Will you kiss it to make it better?" She raised an eyebrow but leaned in to give a gentle kiss where he asked. Tim then playfully pulled her onto his lap and kissed her more seriously. "Be sure to come back soon and don't spend all of Dad's money shopping," he told her as he let her go. She seemed a bit breathless after the kiss, as if she wanted more, even with Dad around. "No more kisses for you. It's almost 7:30. We'll have to see how nice you look tonight before I think about more kisses. Some of my old friends will be there, and they're very pretty." She playfully pushed him again, then covered her face and said, "I'm so sorry for hurting you." Tim laughed. "I was just teasing about it hurting. I think all the fresh air and exercise have made me feel great because I hardly feel anything anymore." "Best PT around?" Tim felt some improvement. His arm and leg were healing quickly, but they had more pressing issues to deal with. Tim got dressed and took the power wagon to meet Daniel and call Nate. Nate sounded excited on the phone. "You're going to love this, brother. Their friends aren't part of the cartel. They are those same wannabe gangsters we've dealt with before twice, actually, since you weren't there the second time. They can be dangerous, sure, but they aren't connected, not too bright, and not well-trained like real cartel soldiers. If we plan this right, we can stop them before they really begin. I'll be out with a couple of helpers in an hour. We're bringing some supplies and equipment. Can you run the irrigation well enough to overflow your tank and get some water in the creek between the hills? I'll explain more when I get there, okay?" "Sounds good," Tim said. "Dora is out shopping with Jeannie and her dad, so you might want to bring something for lunch. Daniel has the brisket cooked for the party, but we have too much to do to stop for lunch." Nate suggested, How about a tray of enchiladas from Tio Mauricio's cafe, a salad, and some soda? I bet Daniel can find some tortillas, too. Tim agreed that sounded delicious, but they might need a nap afterward. Tim and Daniel turned on the irrigation well. The holding tank filled up quickly and water flowed out into the creek. After turning it off, they talked about Nate's plan. Tim started smiling as ideas came to him, and then they went to the equipment shed to clear out space for the decorating team. There was an oil spot under the tractor, so Daniel used cat litter to soak it up. Then he pulled tables and chairs out of the storage building. Tim used a gasoline blower to clean the concrete floor, followed by a power washer to remove dirt and oil. By the time the decorating committee arrived, everything was set, leading to many hugs and warm welcomes. Tim recognized everyone, having known some of them well before they got married, and there were some friendly hugs exchanged. Tim used a ladder to connect the extension cord to the old-fashioned Christmas lights that hung in the rafters all year, then helped Daniel arrange the tables and chairs as the committee requested. The committee members covered the tables with decorations and hung colorful banners between the posts. The DJ arrived with his equipment, so the two men helped him set up the sound system with 6 large speakers. He checked the equipment and adjusted the sound for the open shed before heading back to town. The decorating committee greeted them with hugs and kisses before they soon left. Nate and Chi arrived just after they departed, and they shared lunch at an extra undecorated table to keep it clean and avoid trouble with the committee. After lunch, they talked about Nate's plan to deal with the intruders they expected to arrive in a few days. They made some changes after riding around the area they thought might be the battlegrounds. Tim insisted they wait to finalize anything until the colonel could share his thoughts. Chui, a fellow Vietnam veteran, offered many clever ideas for traps, but that meant they had to ensure everyone was aware of them. The shoppers returned around 3 o'clock instead of 1:30, with Joe's pickup truck full of bags. Dora got out, took 2 bags inside, and headed toward the house. Tim, Nate, Chi, and Daniel watched from underneath the palm arbor near the cattle pens. Joe waved to them from the truck window as he drove to the ranch house. By the time they all arrived, Joe and Jeannie were carrying in the other 6 bags. A few bags clearly came from Nuevo Laredo, but Tim also noticed bags from other stores. He wondered aloud how they managed to shop at all those places between 9 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. Joe joked that he and Dora kept the other shopper on a short leash. I didn't know how long we would be here or what we would be doing, plus I didn't expect to be without a washer and dryer. I needed clothes, Jeannie explained. It looks like you bought a few, Nate teased. But is that really enough for a month? Not even close, but now I know where all the good shops are, Jeannie replied. Turning to Tim, she said, I got you and Dad something too. Nice leather belts with silver buckles from Mexico, new jeans, and Western shirts from Joe Brand. Tim looked at her seriously. You got 5 bags of clothes and we just got a belt, jeans, and a shirt? Isn't that a bit selfish? She smiled and said, Next time you can come with me. With the big party only hours away, Nate and Chewy headed to town. As Jeannie started her preparations, Tim took Joe on a tour of the chosen battlefield to get his thoughts on the updated plans, including the traps Chewy suggested. Like Chewy, Joe was a Vietnam vet and agreed that traps would be helpful in guiding the enemies into a designated area, adding a couple more ideas of his own. Though he was a bit unsure about Nate's plan to catch the enemies off guard, he agreed it could turn the situation in their favor if it worked. If not, the other plans would still be good enough. Back at the house, the men used the small bathroom to clean up while Jeannie took her time in the larger bathroom with the dressing table. When Tim walked out in the new clothes Jeannie had bought, he and Joe burst into laughter, pointing at each other in joyful surprise. Joe's shirt was black with shiny gold and silver patterns across the shoulders and back. Tim wore a white shirt with green vines and bright red roses, and even the cuffs had rose designs. Once they settled down, they opened 2 beers, sat at the table, and joked about their outfits. They had clicked right away, but had grown even closer over the past few days. Maybe it was their shared affection for Jeannie, but mostly they simply enjoyed each other's company. As they sipped their drinks, they heard the door creak open. They both turned to see Jeannie making her grand entrance, and it was indeed something special. Her honey blonde hair flowed down to her shoulders, and her cheerful face had a light touch of makeup, with bright pink lips. Her dress was a mix of vibrant colors, pink, blue, green, and yellow swirling beautifully. The dress had an elastic top that sat comfortably on her shoulders, with white lace accentuating her waist and hips. The skirt flared out elegantly, ending a bit above her knees. Her shiny sandals drew attention to her graceful legs and pretty feet. She wrapped a white shawl around her shoulders, saying it would keep her warm as the night went on. She spun around playfully, showing off her dress, and asked with a smile, "How do I look?" It was clear Tim and Joe were both captivated by her appearance. "Jeannie, you must have picked that up while you and Dora sent me to order lunch," Joe said, trying to sound serious. "As lovely as it is, I'm not so sure about it for my youngest daughter." His stern face couldn't hide the smile in his eyes. Tim quickly disagreed, saying, "Sorry, Dad, but I think she looks fantastic." Jeannie beamed and twirled again, playfully teasing with a mischievous smile. "Are my guys ready to go? You both look great in your new clothes." "I can hardly wait to show you off." "You mean you want to show yourself off, right?" Tim replied. "It's going to be a scene when you arrive fashionably late," he said, checking his watch. "And I'm telling you now, I won't be fighting off a bunch of people to keep you safe, so please don't drink too much and flirt." Jeannie started to leave, playfully swaying her hips. "Oh, I can't help it if guys think I'm cute and want to talk to me." "Dad, this is your daughter. Can't you handle her?" Tim pretended to plead, and they both laughed. He had a feeling tonight would be interesting. He wondered if his dad had ever seen Jeannie in that tight electric blue dress before. Joe parked right where Dora had saved a spot for him, next to the shed, with the passenger door facing a crowd of people chatting away. Some noticed the new truck, but most continued their lively conversations. Jeannie waited for Tim to open her door and help her down from her dad's tall truck. Normally, she would have jumped right out, but tonight was special, and she wanted to make a good impression on Tim's friends and past flames. Theodora had told her that arriving in eye-catching party attire would grab their attention, and then it was up to her to impress them. She smiled as the chatter around her softened, and all eyes turned toward her and Tim. Tim looked amazing in his tight jeans and fitted shirt, with a black hat and boots. The shiny belt buckle drew attention to his flat stomach. Jeannie held onto his arm a little tighter, enjoying the moment. Dad stepped back, letting his daughter take the spotlight and thinking that maybe the princess was still around, at least a little bit. The next half hour was a mix of meeting new people for Jeannie and reconnecting for Tim and Joe. They laughed at each other's outfits, realizing they fit right in. Jeannie knew her look was working, just like Dora said. Nate wasn't as tall as Tim, but Jeannie thought he looked good in his cowboy clothes. His wife, Linda, was stunning, too. With wavy hair and a figure that looked like a model's, she drew attention with her long legs. Jeannie felt a bit envious of Linda until Linda expressed her admiration for Jeannie's looks, calling her beautiful and complimenting her figure. They quickly became friends, walking off together as Linda insisted that Jeannie meet her friends and share all about her and Tim. "Together again," Nate said with a grin, linking his arm with Tim's. They walked over to a group of men standing by the keg, and Nate kept teasing his wife. "You need to catch up with all your brothers, cousins, and brothers-in-law, and I want to hear all about you and Jeannie." Tim nudged him playfully, and they both laughed as they approached the kegs, where their old friends greeted them warmly. About a dozen men were gathered around the kegs, while an equal number of women surrounded Jeannie at the punch bowl filled with Cheetah's well-known Caribbean rum punch. She claimed the recipe was from her grandmother, but anyone who tried it felt sure it had been made by pirates who enjoyed their rum a little too much. It tasted great, but could easily make anyone dizzy after just a couple of cups. Tim noticed Jeannie was busy chatting and drinking happily, and he worried about her. "Does she handle her drinks well?" Nate asked Joe when he joined them. "She looks so small and is drinking that punch like it's nothing." Joe shook his head. "Not really, but she tends to drink a lot when she feels shy, and she's been nervous all day, so keep an eye on her." "There are plenty of eyes on her, right, guys?" Nate asked the men nearby. They all agreed, saying they would watch over her all night, and smiled at Tim. Someone called out to Jeannie and Linda, and all the ladies smiled and waved as they refreshed their drinks and moved to join the men. Tim found it hard to say if Jeannie was already feeling the effects of the punch, or just enjoying the lively atmosphere and meeting new people. He heard a whistle, turned to see Daniel waving at them, asking for help with the ice chests full of brisket. Daniel and his team had been checking on the briskets and adding sauce all afternoon, letting them rest for a few hours in the chests, wrapped in butcher paper. It took 2 men to lift each 64-quart chest, and there were 3 chests full of brisket. That was more than enough for the night, leaving plenty for guests to take home, true to the hospitality of South Texas. The brisket was placed on a cutting board at the end of a long table filled with covered dishes brought by guests. Daniel started slicing it, asking each guest if they preferred it moist or trimmed. The Kelly boys, Linda, Jeannie, and Joe, waited until last, standing by the line to greet and chat briefly with each of their 80 guests before filling their plates with food. Dora stood behind the table, ready to bring out more of anything that ran low from a hidden table behind her where extra food was stored. Jeannie had won over many of the women, and the men were drawn to her just by being nearby. Tim knew she was already accepted by the group. After all, Linda treated her like family, and she was with him, which made it easier for everyone. What he wondered was how she described her relationship with him to all the women. He hadn't shown much affection, yet everyone acted like they were together. This made him think, why haven't people mentioned Karen? He figured that Nate, Linda, Dora, and Daniel held the answer. The meal was fantastic. Daniel was an excellent cook, and Dora's special sauce was different from what they usually had in Central and South Texas. The dishes were tasty and unique, especially Dora's frijoles borrachos, packed with secret ingredients that created flavors no one could quite explain. As soon as the first guests approached the dessert table, the DJ played cheerful music, and before long, Mexican polka music filled the room while everyone danced. Jeannie and Linda swayed in their seats, looking at their partners with playful eyes, so the brothers stood up and took their hands. After a few polkas, the DJ introduced a country song, and couples shared warm smiles and hugs. Jeannie looked up at Tim and rested her head on his chest, holding onto his waist. They danced quietly while others smiled at them. She smelled wonderful, moved gracefully, and they danced as if they were one. But when he felt her closeness, he couldn't help but react. She noticed and raised her eyes to him with a playful grin. As the song ended, he held her close and whispered, "You started this. You need to keep it under control." A new slow song began, and she wrapped her arms around his neck, leaning back a bit while being close to him. She tilted her head slightly, gave him a sweet smile, and asked, "What do you mean, Tim? I thought we were just work friends with a shared problem. Surely a colleague and friend wouldn't make me feel this way." "I may have downplayed our relationship a bit," he said. "A bit?" she replied. "Well, maybe more than a bit," he admitted. She leaned closer and asked, "So you mean it's more than just a little true? Do you really like me a lot but can't say it?" "That's right," he whispered. "But we're both married, and I don't want my friends to misunderstand us." "I wouldn't worry. Your friends already know about us. It's pretty well known. As your old girlfriend said, if 2 people agree on something and one breaks the agreement, it's no longer valid. They accept that our marriages are done, and they seem happy I'm not out to hurt anyone." She cuddled up to him as they danced. Tim noticed her dad talking with some older couples in a serious way. From time to time, they glanced over at him. He wasn't sure if it was because of what was being said or how Joe's daughter was dancing with him. As Patsy Cline sang, Tim watched the couples around him. Remembering his connection to each one, he realized they were his true friends. It had been easy to feel hurt by his wife and colleagues after watching those films, but tonight he saw that none of them were real friends, except for Karen. No one here would have done what they did to him. While Karen was indeed beautiful, his true friends would never have tried to take advantage of her, and if she had tried anything, they would have told him. His heart hardened again. Each day added to his anger and determination. It wasn't just about betrayal, it was about respect. Every one of them, including his wife, had shown him the greatest disrespect. Even worse, Karen disrespected her own family and broke the promises she made in front of so many people. Now, seeing how well she was caring for their children, his determination to leave her hurtfully had softened. However, he realized that none of the women here tonight would treat him the way she had. With that thought, his resolve grew stronger. Jeannie seemed to sense his inner conflict. She hugged him tighter and whispered something against his chest that sounded like, "I care about you." He hugged her back, whispered the same into her hair, and looked over at her dad and the others. They were no longer there. He danced Jeannie around in a circle to look at the whole shed. He didn't see anyone there, but he noticed a new fire burning in the calf pen. "It's time, sweetie," he said to the blonde angel in his arms. "We need to have our meetings." She let go and looked up at him. "You and Dora explain things to the women. I'll talk to the men. Make sure they understand we can't say when or how many, but we need to be ready starting tomorrow afternoon. Anyone could be in danger because of Los Diablos, and they must know the risks. Some of their men have been linked to the 3 events that happened over the years, and at least 2 were among the girls rescued from being taken away. Help them see this. Tell them what they need to know about the people who have been trying to harm me and take you away, but help them truly understand the danger. We don't want to lose anyone because they weren't paying attention." Jeannie stepped back. Tim nodded at the DJ, who stopped the music and asked the women to stay in the shed while the men moved to the cattle pens. He got up and followed Tim, while Jeannie went to the center to meet Dora. Once all the men were gathered in the calf pen around the fire, Tim called Nate, Joe, Chuy, and Daniel to join him, and Choi brought his younger brother Abel over. Tim quickly explained what was happening and said that anyone with other duties could leave without any issues. No one moved. He nodded and continued, this time giving more details about who was involved and why. He admitted they did not know when the situation would become serious or how many they might face. They needed to be alert and ready for an unknown number of days. He emphasized that because of Los Diablos, some or all of them could be at risk, as could their families, and he told them the women were being informed about this in the shed, too. As for planning, he asked Nate, Joe, Chi, and Daniel to share their ideas. Nate presented the plans, Joe added more details, and Chi and his brother discussed the traps and materials they would need. Daniel talked about his role, focusing on communication before, during, and after the event. He turned to the 2 deputies who were off duty and not in uniform and asked them to explain what they would do. Jose nodded to Jesse, who replied, "You all know Miguel, and he knows you, but neither the sheriff's office nor state law enforcement will step in until something happens, and that could be too late. He asked us to follow the law, but more importantly to respect what the law is meant to do, which is to protect people from criminals. His office and other law enforcement agencies are worried about the rumors they are hearing. Rumors have spread about a troublemaking gang in South Texas that has been involved in plans to harm and kidnap people due to a long-standing grudge. Starting tomorrow, one of us must be here at all times, driving cars without markings and equipped with top-notch radios. If any intruders come onto the ranch, we will communicate in code via the radio and help protect those in danger. Other deputies will be stationed along the roads leading here to alert us if they see anything unusual. My friends and brothers, now we stand united. We must safeguard our families and friends from these wicked men. This is our land, and these are our people. Timoteo has protected us and our loved ones from danger before, and Nate and Choi have led us to victory against them. Now we come together again to defend ourselves and our community, to rid ourselves of the evil for good. We are Los Ratones de la Brazada." The group of 48 men cheered, raising their fists in the air. Tim let out a rebel yell, and Nate joined in, inspiring cheers from the others. Once the noise settled, Joe asked who could join a meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. for a practice run, leading to more enthusiastic cheers and calls of Pandilla Tasa Gio. Tim felt excitement coursing through him and headed towards the implement shed after one member shouted, "Brothers, let's go see our beautiful women to dance and enjoy some drinks." Tim thought of the lovely woman waiting for him and remembered the joy of dancing with her. While he wanted another drink, it was her presence he truly desired. The beautiful women greeted their returning men with joyful cheers, and warm hugs were shared all around. The DJ started the music again, playing lively polkas and salsas, then got the men excited with the traditional Jarabe Tapatio dance. There weren't many hats, and the dresses were shorter than usual, which meant the spinning women showed off even more of their legs. Tim was pleasantly surprised to see Jeannie knew the dance, but was especially amazed by La Guerra Bonita, who received the loudest cheers when it was her turn to perform last. With her blonde hair flowing and her lovely legs on display, she danced gracefully, capturing the audience's delight. She was fully immersed in the moment, enjoying herself without a care for the crowd's noise. After all, she told him later, she had years of experience dancing for larger crowds, and she was dancing just for him. After a brief break for everyone to catch their breath and celebrate each other, the DJ announced it was getting late, so this would be the final song. He played a final song for all the couples, and everyone danced, even Joe, who was paired with Dora's youngest sister, the only single woman there. As they held each other, Tim quietly translated the lyrics of Cuando Caliente el Sol, a song about love. Jeannie moved closer as he spoke the sweet words. When the song ended, she looked up at him with dreamy eyes and softly said, "I want to be with you." He kissed her forehead and held her for a moment before guests started saying goodbye and thanking them for hosting the gathering. Tim redirected the thanks to where it truly belonged, to Daniel and Dora. Once the crowd thinned out, Tim called Jim Boyd. "We'll be as ready as we can be after tomorrow night. Do you have any last thoughts or updates?" "We're confident we found the leaks. We caught them in action on tape. What day works for you?" Boyd replied. "We have a dress rehearsal tomorrow evening. Any time after that works, actually, the sooner the better. My team has lives outside of this, and we are ready to wrap it up." As soon as they got into Joe's truck, he said, "Jeannie, I think Tim should share more about his life before this becomes more serious." "Tim, I'm guessing that Karen never knew about your training or your past, did she? You don't have to answer right now, but you should share everything with my daughter. If I know her, it won't matter, but she needs to know who she's with. Everyone sees you as a great teacher and coach, someone who cares about the kids, the sponsor of FCA, and a champion for what is right. But I found out tonight that you're more complicated than that. I get it. I'm more than just a dad who sells cars and goes to church myself. Jeannie will see things in both of us that she never imagined over the next few days. But Amelia knows all about me and chose to be with me. You should give Jeannie that same chance to choose." "Yes, sir, I agree. I'll talk to her tonight or tomorrow if that works better," Tim replied. "I'm staying with Chi and Imelda tonight. We'll be up early to prepare for the upcoming event, so you two are on your own until evening tomorrow," Joe said. "See you then." He left to surprise Jeannie with a kiss on her cheek, shook Tim's hand, and drove away. "What was that all about?" she asked with a puzzled look. "He, Chi, Daniel, and their wives had a serious talk about me," Tim explained. "Joe wants me to be open about some things that might concern you. When do you want me to share that?" Jeannie watched his face closely. She saw her frown disappear and a smile appear instead. "Well, we have until evening tomorrow. Let's have that serious talk over coffee then. The dance was a blast, and I have better plans for tonight." She could feel Tim's confusion. He was clearly fascinated by her, but they were both still married. They were married to unfaithful partners, married to people who didn't appreciate them and had caused them trouble. But as the lawyer said, a broken agreement is no longer valid. Once she got him inside the dimly lit house, she turned to face him, pressed her body against his, and pulled his head down for a kiss that she hoped would show how she felt about him. His hands explored her figure, gently moving toward her curves. She adjusted a bit, teasing him with the strength she felt inside. Tim seemed unsure, but she could sense his inner struggle. They broke the agreement, not us. If one side does not follow through, it means the agreement is over. I know my dad worries about your past, but it doesn't matter to me. I love who you are now. We'll see how you feel in the morning, Tim said softly, resting his head near hers. Tonight, I want to show you how much you mean to me. If you decide you don't want anything to do with me afterward, that's your choice, and I will respect it. Honey, I know more than you think, Jeannie replied confidently. The women weren't just waiting around while you talked. They were discussing events and how you helped many of them when they needed it. I might seem naive, but I understand my dad better than he realizes, and I know you more than you think. She looked deeply into his eyes, her voice dropping to a more intimate tone, and challenged, Tonight is going to be unforgettable, Tim. Are you ready? When Tim opened his eyes, he found her golden hair on his face, her head resting on his shoulder and her leg draped over him. He felt her warmth next to him. He gently shifted so he could touch her back and admired the softness of her skin. He turned slightly to get a better look at her. It can't be as perfect as it seemed last night, he thought. But he quickly realized his senses told a different story. Tim admired Jeannie's presence in the morning light. She was graceful, intelligent, and kind, and he had always been drawn to her since they first met more than a year ago. Jeannie had an easy way about her, whether she was coaching or simply talking. Her style and charm, along with her natural beauty, had always caught his attention. He had seen her in various outfits, from professional clothes to casual wear, and even an elegant blue dress. But nothing had prepared him for how stunning she appeared the previous night, when they shared an intimate moment. As they sat together, Tim held her close, thinking back to the night before. It had started like any other time, with gentle kisses that grew more intense as the night went on. There was a new energy between them, something more passionate, and their connection deepened in ways neither of them had fully experienced before. Jeannie's usual calm demeanor shifted, showing a side of her that surprised Tim. She was full of confidence, wanting to explore their relationship with more intensity. It wasn't just a moment of tenderness, but one filled with strong emotions, and they both felt swept up in the excitement of it. Their time together was powerful, but Tim knew that what mattered most wasn't just the heat of the moment. It was the way they connected emotionally, how well they understood each other, and how they always found comfort in each other's company. As they sat by the fire, quietly enjoying the peaceful morning, Tim was reminded that their bond went far beyond any single moment. Jeannie smiled up at him, her usual playful nature returning. Tim responded with a warm smile of his own, knowing that whatever came next, they would continue to face it together. The sun began to rise, casting a soft glow over the yard, signaling the start of a new day. Tim held Jeannie close, appreciating the warmth of the moment between them. He admired her beauty and grace, feeling lucky to be so close to someone he had quietly admired for so long. As they shared a tender embrace, their connection deepened, with soft kisses and gentle touches that felt meaningful and intimate. Their shared time was filled with affection, but there was a calmness between them as well, something that felt comfortable and right. Tim kissed her softly, letting the moment unfold naturally, enjoying the closeness they had built over time. Jeannie smiled warmly at him, her eyes reflecting the care and trust they had in each other. They sat together, enjoying the simple pleasure of being near one another, letting the peacefulness of the night wrap around them. Tim couldn't help but feel a deep sense of appreciation for her, not just for how she looked, but for who she was, a kind, intelligent woman who had been a constant in his life for over a year. As they spent time together, the connection they shared felt like more than just attraction. It was built on mutual respect and understanding. Tim held her hand, and they both relaxed into the quiet of the evening, grateful for the time they could share in such a peaceful way. Their bond grew stronger in those moments, not through words or actions, but simply by being there for each other, enjoying the warmth of their friendship and the trust they had built over time. The evening passed gently, with the soft glow of the fire lighting their faces, and the night surrounding them with its calm embrace. She sighed softly and tried to pull him closer, but he held back gently. He moved down her left leg, placing soft kisses along her thigh and then under her knee, before continuing down to her boot. He took off her boots and socks, then massaged her feet while kissing each toe. Her eyes were dazed, focused straight ahead as if in a dream. As he shifted to her right leg, he took his time, drawing out the moment. When he began kissing his way up her thigh, she begged, "Please, Tim, I can't wait any longer. I'm so ready, just stop teasing." He looked up at her and said, "Now you understand how I felt waiting while you crossed and uncrossed those lovely legs, or leaned over my shoulder in the office. You know what you've done. Tonight, I want to make it right." "No, Tim, I need you now," she pleaded. "I've wanted this for so long. It's been 18 months. You can't imagine how I felt when you flirted with me and showed off." She remembered a time when she stood by his desk asking questions. He smiled as he explained things, his fingers brushing lightly along her leg. She had pulled back, feeling a mix of emotions. They were both married then, but things had changed, and now she wanted him completely. "You want me to make you feel good, Jeannie?" he asked playfully. "You want me to kiss you until you can't take it anymore?" Her breath caught when he touched her, and her body responded eagerly. "You're feeling brave tonight, aren't you?" he teased. "Just for you, please," she whispered. Her voice faded as he continued his gentle caress, and her entire body reacted as he touched her in ways that made her heart race. A sound of joy escaped her lips, and in that moment, everything else faded away as she felt overwhelmed by the connection they shared. Eventually, she relaxed, resting against the table, feeling safe and content. Tim admired Jeannie, taking in the quiet moment. She was still and relaxed, a peaceful calm after an intense connection. He gently held her, feeling her heartbeat slow and steady, and smiled to himself, proud of the bond they shared. They had spent the evening together, growing closer in ways that transcended words, a connection that was built on mutual trust and understanding. He called her name softly, checking to make sure she was okay after the overwhelming emotions they both experienced. She didn't respond immediately, but Tim knew she was fine, just resting, worn out from the intensity of their time together. He let her rest for a moment longer, watching over her with care. After a few quiet moments, she stirred slightly, and Tim gently lowered her legs, making sure she was comfortable. He was proud of how close they had grown, and he knew that what they had was special. He chuckled softly, thinking about how much they had shared. As Jeannie opened her eyes, still looking a bit dazed, she whispered, "Not here. Let's go to your bed. I think I bumped my head." She gave a soft laugh, clearly exhausted but content. Tim helped her up gently, guiding her with care. He smiled down at her and said, "Let's make sure you're comfortable." With that, he led her to a quieter, more comfortable space where they could rest and enjoy the calm after an emotional evening. In that quiet room, the two of them found peace, knowing that their bond had deepened in a way neither had expected. The night had been intense, but it had also been filled with respect and understanding, something they both cherished deeply. They lay down together, simply enjoying the comfort of each other's presence, ready to face whatever came next. Tim noticed how close Jeannie was to him, and the intensity of the moment filled the room. He held her gently, helping her feel at ease as they moved together. Their connection was strong, and the way they communicated without words made it clear how much they trusted each other. Tim was careful, making sure that everything was comfortable for her. Jeannie responded, though she was a bit overwhelmed by the closeness of their bond. She let out a soft sigh, showing how much the moment meant to her. They moved in sync, both fully present and in tune with each other's emotions. Tim adjusted, making sure she was at ease as they continued, their rhythm steady and calm. When the emotions became too intense, Jeannie let out a quiet gasp, leaning into him for support. Tim held her securely, smiling gently as she adjusted to the closeness. He could see how much they were both enjoying the moment, but he made sure to go slowly, keeping things easy and respectful. Afterward, Tim helped Jeannie to the bed, ensuring she was comfortable. She rested for a moment, clearly happy but a bit worn out from the experience. When she stirred, she smiled at him, her eyes reflecting the trust and care they shared. Tim lay down beside her, wrapping her in his arms, and they both relaxed into the quietness of the evening. The connection they had built was strong, and they knew this bond was about more than just physical closeness. It was about being there for each other in every way, understanding and mutual respect. As they lay there, the room filled with a peaceful calm, and they enjoyed the quiet together, knowing that their relationship had grown even stronger in those moments. Tim held Jeannie close, feeling the intensity of the moment as they shared a deep connection. Their closeness had grown stronger, and Tim admired her with a sense of appreciation for the bond they had formed. He marveled at the way they were able to understand each other without words, simply enjoying the time spent together. As the intensity grew, neither of them was focused on anything but the warmth of the moment. Tim felt a rush of emotions, holding Jeannie tightly and enjoying the peace that followed. They stayed close, feeling a sense of satisfaction and contentment from the connection they had just shared. Tim smiled down at Jeannie, and she looked up at him with sparkling eyes. She laughed softly and said, "I had no idea it could feel so special. You've really made this unforgettable for me." Tim chuckled and responded playfully, "You think so? Well, it's not just about me, it's about how well we connect." Jeannie giggled, clearly enjoying the light-hearted exchange. "It's definitely the connection and everything else too. she teased with a wink. They both laughed together, enjoying the peacefulness after their intense time together. They knew that what they had was something meaningful, built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. As they lay side by side, the bond between them felt even stronger, and they quietly relished the closeness they shared, content in each other's presence. Jeannie sat close to Tim, resting her hand gently on his chest. She smiled, clearly feeling at ease, and looked into his eyes. There was a playful glint in her expression as she spoke softly. "I feel like I've found a whole new side of myself," she said with a light laugh. "I never knew I could feel this way, and it's all because of you." Tim smiled back at her, appreciating her openness and the bond they had formed over time. "I think we just connect in a way that works for both of us," he replied. "It's something special." As they sat there together, the connection between them deepened, and they shared a quiet moment, reflecting on how much they had grown closer. Jeannie rested her head on Tim's chest, feeling content in the calm of the moment. "I've never experienced anything like this before," she murmured. "You've made me feel things I didn't know I could feel." Tim chuckled softly. "I guess we've been getting to know each other for a long time now. Maybe that's why everything feels so natural." Jeannie nodded, clearly in agreement, and let out a small laugh. "It does feel like we were meant for each other," she said quietly, her head still resting on his chest. "Whatever it is, I'm just glad we're here together." They stayed like that for a while, simply enjoying the peace and the connection they had built. Their relationship felt strong, full of mutual respect and understanding, and they both knew that what they had was something special. As the night grew quieter, they rested together, feeling completely at ease, knowing that their bond was built on more than just physical closeness. It was something real, and it was theirs to cherish. Tim looked at Jeannie with a serious expression, but kept his tone playful. "I just want you to know, I'm not letting go of this. Whatever we've found, I'm holding on to it." With a joking pout, Tim added, "But you know, every time you pass out on me, you leave me hanging. What do you think? Maybe it's time I get my turn?" Jeannie couldn't help but laugh at his mock complaint. "All right, big guy, I'll try my best," she teased. "Even if I can't keep up, you just do what you need to, okay?" Tim smiled, getting up from the bed. He playfully told her, "All right then, let's make this about me for once." He guided her gently, positioning her on the bed in a way that made her comfortable. The mood was lighthearted, and they both laughed together, enjoying the moment. As Tim moved closer, Jeannie glanced back at him with a playful grin. She was clearly having fun, and the mood was one of mutual teasing and affection. They shared a moment of closeness, filled with trust and understanding. Tim gave her a playful tap, and Jeannie responded with exaggerated squeals, pretending to be hurt. They both laughed, the lighthearted atmosphere filling the room. The teasing continued for a bit, with them both exchanging smiles and laughter, showing how comfortable they had become with one another. After a while, they settled into a more relaxed moment, sharing a quiet connection. Tim wrapped his arms around her gently, and they both enjoyed the closeness without needing to say much. The night was peaceful, filled with warmth and affection, as they held each other close, feeling content and at ease. Their bond had grown even stronger, built on trust, understanding, and mutual care. With the playful teasing over, they found a quiet calm together, cherishing the connection they shared, and knowing they could rely on each other no matter what. Jeannie lowered her head, watching Tim's strong movements as he held her close, completely captivated by their connection. She felt a wave of warmth and closeness, the bond between them deepening with every moment they shared. As she shifted slightly, Tim gently pulled her head back, adjusting the way they were together. She could feel the intensity building, her heart racing as they both moved in sync. All she could do was whisper his name, overwhelmed by the closeness and intensity of their time together. The feelings continued to build, spreading from her head to her toes, until everything seemed to come together in a rush of emotion and connection. They both cried out, completely immersed in the moment, as their bond grew even stronger. Afterward, Tim lay beside her on the bed, holding her close. Jeannie snuggled up against him, enjoying the comfort of his strong arms around her. She whispered his name, telling him how much she loved the way they connected, how special he made her feel. Tim smiled, teasing her a bit, saying she was the most beautiful woman he had ever known. Jeannie playfully elbowed him, laughing at his teasing. "So that's all I am to you?" she joked, pretending to be offended. He laughed, kissing her gently. "You know I'm just teasing," he said. "You're the best, and I love you." She couldn't help but smile, feeling warm and happy. Okay, she said with a playful sigh. "But I'm not going to put up with your teasing all morning. I'm going to make us some coffee." Jeannie got out of bed and gave him a playful look before heading toward the kitchen. As she walked away, Tim smiled, watching her with admiration. Before she left the room, Tim called out, "Hey, don't forget to grab some cleaner for the table. We made quite a mess last night." Jeannie turned to look at the table, her eyes widening as she realized they'd have to clean up. She gave him a playful look of mock horror, knowing they'd have a good laugh about it later. Together, they had shared an unforgettable night, and as they moved into the new day, they knew their connection would only grow stronger with time. She felt embarrassed and a little strange, but there was something about that feeling she found enjoyable. She quickly made some coffee and returned to the bed. "Since all you care about is how I look, I guess you should be with me again. If you can," she teased. He lay on his back under the sheet and told her, "I will always be here for you. I care about you." She kissed him eagerly. One hand touched his back while the other explored her own body. "Ow! Now I feel sore. Maybe we should drink that coffee now," she suggested. He moved closer, and they shared an intimate moment together. She moaned softly, feeling a rush of sensations. After a while, they both relaxed, feeling a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. After some time, she got up and went to the bathroom to shower. He attempted to follow, but she closed the door and said, "No more of that, I need a little time. Please take your shower in the other bathroom and let me be," she said playfully. He heard her laugh and then the water started running. He decided to take his own shower. By mid-morning, they poured their first cups of coffee and felt very hungry. "Should we have breakfast or go right to lunch?" Tim asked. She glanced at the clock and decided lunch would be better. Tim went to his truck and brought back some brisket Daniel had put in the cooler earlier. Tim had seen him pack it along with some lettuce, tomatoes, and a jar of salsa. A pack of flour tortillas was resting in the sun, so they had everything needed for brisket tacos. The tacos and coffee were just what they needed, refreshing them. After cleaning up the table, Tim poured fresh coffee for both of them and invited her to sit with him at the glass table on the porch. Once they were settled, he asked, "Do you want to hear my life story, or do you have questions you'd like to ask?" Jeannie looked at him closely and replied, "You are the kindest person I know, always there for your friends and family. Everyone loves you for it. But when someone threatens your loved ones, you can be tough and unyielding. You are the best friend and the strongest foe anyone could have." That's what I was told. What else can you add? A lot of detail. That's the gist of it, but it doesn't really show the whole picture. Saying someone is hard as nails doesn't truly convey what it feels like to confront a person who has done terrible things to the girls he's harmed. It doesn't capture the scene where the place filled with those who hurt others is engulfed in flames. You can't hear the panic as people rush out, confused and desperate. You don't hear the feelings of those who survive, or their cries when they understand that sharing what they know won't save them. Describing them as hard as nails, unforgiving, and dangerous is fair, but doesn't tell the full story. So, Jeannie, if you want the details, I'll share them. I owe you that respect, and you need to know what you might face if you stay with me after the coming trouble. I realize that once you hear the details or see me act, you might decide you don't want to be with me anymore, and I will respect that. It will hurt, but I'll understand. My friends are right. When someone does wrong to me or the people I care about, something inside me turns cold. I feel angry, but my heart becomes still. I can be fierce and unyielding. My father says it comes from my Irish, Scottish, and Viking roots. I don't know if that's true, but from what I've learned about my background, I, like them, have a warrior spirit. I never told Karen because I didn't want her to see me that way. I didn't want to scare her by showing that I can become someone fierce. Unfortunately, you have been warned, and you might see that side of me soon. I can't hide it from you, hoping that I won't have to show that side again like I did with Karen. Your dad knows, and he understands. He has his own experiences. It worries him, but he knows he and your mom have built a good life despite his past. That doesn't mean we will, but at least we have a good example. Regardless, I will cherish every moment we have, whether that's just a day or two more. I'll care for you no matter what, even if it means from a distance." Jeannie's gaze stayed steady as she listened. She reached out, gently touched his cheek, and said, "I already see your heart, Timothy. I won't back away from the struggle, and I trust you to always treat me, our family, and our friends with kindness. I'm not afraid of what comes next or how you might act. We became one last night, and we will stay that way." Mom shared stories about Dad's time in the Army. She said he did things in the war he wasn't proud of, but it was necessary. Helping those girls who had been taken and harmed was part of war. When the enemy comes with plans to hurt you or take me away, that is also a part of war. You have to do what is right to protect yourself. I have a question for you, Tim. Am I strong enough for you? This worries me. I should have stood up to Larry long ago. I should have told him to leave me alone when he got angry because I was talking to one of his friends. When we got married, I should have spoken up when he kept me from my family. I should have asked for help when he hurt me and said it was my fault. I felt weak then, but now I promise I will stand up for myself. Maybe that makes me a bad person too. I don't know. I just know that I get strength from you, and I hope I'm not taking too much from you in return." Tim smiled and gestured for her to sit with him on the soft love seat by the wall. He pulled her onto his lap when she got closer. She faced him, curled up against him, wrapped an arm around his shoulders, and kissed him deeply. After her bath, Jeannie wore a short, off-the-shoulder yellow dress with pretty designs, and she had cute sandals on. She seemed to have chosen to skip wearing anything underneath. Tim's hand gently moved along her leg. She broke the kiss, adjusted her dress, and pulled him closer. "Hey, can you two take a break?" Nate called out. "It's entertaining, and Jeannie looks amazing, but we have serious things to work on. Take a short break, go talk to Nate, and let's make important decisions before the coop meeting." Jeannie felt a bit embarrassed that Nate saw them, but she didn't pull away. She just looked over her shoulder and said, "Your timing is off, Nate. Just a few more minutes and I wouldn't have lost track of time." Tim lifted his head, adjusted her dress, and replied, "Joe said we had until 3. We're ahead of schedule." That was before we got the update that they're coming this afternoon and should arrive around dark. Tim laughed and shook his head, turning to Nate. "All right, man, let's focus. We've got things to do, so let's keep things moving." Jeannie stood up slowly, stretching and playfully teasing both Tim and Nate with her carefree attitude. She leaned over to give Tim a kiss, but Nate quickly looked away, feeling the playful tension in the air. Tim chuckled and lightly scolded her. "Jeannie, quit messing with Nate. He's already distracted enough." Jeannie, with her usual playful charm, turned to Nate and said, "Did I cause that, Nate? Maybe you should hurry back to your wife after this. Looks like you could use the break." Nate laughed it off, shaking his head. "You're too much, Jeannie," he said, smiling as he made his way to his truck. Once they were ready to leave, Tim grabbed his boots and jeans, and Jeannie slipped on socks and boots too. They walked over to Nate's truck, and when Jeannie tried to sit in the back, Tim winked and said, "Why don't you ride up front with us? I'm sure Nate can handle it." Jeannie grinned, adjusting her outfit as she slid into the middle seat between the two men. Nate tried his best to stay focused, but he couldn't help but glance over at her, clearly a bit flustered. He started the truck and with a smile muttered, "This gear shift is slick. Hope I don't slip." The three of them laughed, enjoying the lightheartedness of the moment. Jeannie, never one to miss an opportunity for a bit of fun, said, "So, Tim, do big personalities run in your family? Nate sure seems to have one, too." Nate chuckled, catching on to her teasing. "If Tim's the big guy, I'm right up there with him," he joked. Tim shrugged and played along, replying, "I wouldn't know. You'll have to ask his wife." Jeannie grinned at the playful banter, but Nate quickly added, "Only Linda gets to ask questions like that." They all laughed as they drove off, enjoying the playful mood and camaraderie, knowing they had work ahead but still appreciating the light-hearted moments they shared as friends. "You'll just have to trust me on this," Nate replied. "You mean trust you again?" Tim teased. "You know we dated before she chose you." Nate said, "Well, maybe I should let Jeannie check my pet snake. Of course, she might want to play with it, and then what happens to you?" "Oh, I'm not worried. She won't go for something smaller. She likes what she has, Tim answered, and everyone chuckled. As they got closer to the barn, they noticed several cars already parked. Nate parked beside the barn, and they greeted the group gathered there. I hear the troublemakers are eager to arrive and get started, Tim said with a grin. Good to see the leaders are ready to greet them. He asked for updates, saying, We overslept this morning, so fill me in. The smiles quickly turned into loud laughter that made him stop short. He pretended to frown, acting confused. What? I didn't say anything funny, he said with playful annoyance. Laughter continued, and Jeannie turned red when everyone glanced her way. Overslept? Sleeping is not what everyone trying to work out here heard. In fact, Daniel thinks you didn't sleep at all last night. He wondered if the howling coyotes and the wildcats kept you awake. Or maybe it was the other way around. Jeannie blushed deeply and hid her face against Tim's back, avoiding her dad's gaze and the looks from the others. Tim tried to hold back his laughter, but finally said, Yeah, I heard a wildcat a few times, but Jeannie kept dozing off, so she probably missed it. She pinched him gently on the back and stayed hidden for a moment as the laughter faded. Then she stepped around him to face her friends. Okay, you all are being mean. Just because I'm from the city and don't know much about the creatures out here doesn't mean you can tease me. They laughed again, and she added bravely, Some of you even warned me last night, but I didn't really know what to expect, so yes, maybe I screamed a little. Or something. A few times. Even her dad started laughing, but she pushed on. Maybe my fear of the night is something I inherited. I definitely heard my mom scream often enough when I lived at home, she said, giving her dad a pointed look, which only made him laugh harder. Listen, everyone, I think it's time for you to let me have a bit of dignity and stop bringing up my family issues. She stood firmly with her hands on her hips, trying to look serious, but a small smile kept creeping onto her face. What do you mean by gentlemen and ladies? Asked Abel. I don't know. I think it means ladies and gentlemen, you know, those people in fancy clothes who dance, replied Juan. There aren't any of those here. Besides, how can it be night terrors in the morning? The crowd, including Tim, burst into laughter. Jeannie tried to stay serious for a moment, but soon joined in. Once the laughter faded, she playfully swatted Tim on the chest, careful not to touch his injuries, and said, This is all your fault. Tim smiled back. I'll take the blame, but I must say you are easily scared. She playfully hit him again, wearing her funniest smile, and rested her head against his chest. Linda and the other ladies stepped in, saying they should go with her to escape the teasing from the men. They headed toward the house, and as the men watched, Juan shouted, There go the ladies! The women linked arms and walked off with a lively bounce. The men chuckled, but then their mood changed. I'm sorry for dragging you into this, one said. Maybe you should go home to your families. We can handle this without putting you in danger. You mean like when my wife and his sister were taken? Pablo responded, pointing at Juan. It wasn't your problem then, but now we're part of this. No one is going to just stand by while you face those people. I can't believe my brother would even suggest that. All the men nodded in agreement. Tim felt a lump in his throat and apologized for his earlier mistake. I'm sorry. That was my fault. She clapped him on the back and replied, No worries, brother. Tim cleared his throat and entered the storage room. He moved a large saddle stand and unlocked a hidden padlock, lifting a trap door. He carefully descended a few stairs and opened a door with a combination lock. Joe, Daniel, Chi, and Nate began passing up supplies from the storage area. They organized everything into 6 neat stacks. Each stack held 2 long-range rifles with night scopes, 3 shotguns, and 6 rifles with extra ammo. They also brought up a launcher for special devices. When Tim emerged after closing everything, he noticed his friends looking astonished. Wow, Tim, you've been working hard. When did you get the new equipment? Nate asked. I've been adding it every time I visit town for the past year. Daniel knows about it and how to get to it. It's always ready when Los Ratones need it, Tim replied. I'm not really interested, but how illegal is this stuff? Asked Deputy Sheriff Jesse Sturgeon, who worked closely with the sheriff. Tim looked him in the eyes and said, Let's just say that after things settle down, we need to clean up our areas and put everything back in storage. It's probably best not to use the big weapons unless absolutely necessary, but I've been told that any investigation won't be too intense. However, we might need to hide more than I expected if several vehicles are involved. Don't worry, boss. I dug an extra pit after Nate called me, Daniel assured him. But it's not just 3 cars. We're talking 3 vans. Probably 8 or 9 people per van. Maybe 10, Deputy Sturgeon said, looking at Daniel. That's okay. We have plenty of space even if we end up hiding the vans, he replied with a shrug. Leroy stepped forward. Tim, I need to set up the phone and speaker soon. I got here early and ran the line on your power poles, then made a quick repair call over in Millet. I just need to connect the line from the pole to the house and set up the equipment. It won't take more than an hour, but I need to start now. We don't want anyone at the coop asking questions. Do you want to come with me, or just tell me where to set everything up? You all know what to do. Go ahead and set things up for your station before the others arrive. If you have questions, talk to Joe, Nate, Choi, or Daniel. I'll get Jeannie and we'll go to the house with Leroy. She might have a say in where, Tim explained. That drew laughter and playful comments from the group. He glanced at Joe, who smiled and said, Good idea. I bet she will have her preferences. He borrowed Nate's truck and went to get Jeannie. He explained why he needed her, and she quickly came out, followed by laughter. They led Leroy to the house with Jeannie close to Tim. She definitely had preferences, and they made sense. Leroy set up 2 phone jacks, tested everything, and confirmed that the phones were working. Everything is good. I'm heading back to town to finish some paperwork. I'll return at 5 with most of the others. See you then. Jeannie wrapped her arms around Tim as he drove off and asked, Do we have time for a quick moment together? Tim smiled as he looked at Jeannie, who was full of energy once again. She leaned closer and whispered playfully, I need you again. He chuckled, shaking his head and looking up as if asking the sky, What have I gotten myself into? Looks like an angel, but she's unstoppable. Jeannie playfully dropped to her knees, clearly enjoying the teasing mood. Tim gently pulled her back up and said with a smile, Come here, let's do this right. He kissed her softly and helped her out of her dress, leaving her boots on. They moved to the bed where they both found comfort and connection in the moment. Jeannie wrapped her legs around him, meeting him in perfect rhythm, their playful banter now replaced by a deep sense of connection. As the moments passed, they held each other close, laughing and smiling between the intensity, feeling more connected than ever. It was clear their bond was growing stronger with each passing minute. After a while, they collapsed beside each other, catching their breath and enjoying the quiet. Just as they were about to relax, they heard a voice from the door. Wow! We could hear you from outside! Linda called out with a laugh as she knocked and entered. Tim and Jeannie scrambled to pull the covers over themselves, laughing at the surprise visit. You two really know how to put on a show, Linda teased, grinning as she walked in, with Nate following behind, both amused by the situation. All right, enough jokes, Tim said, laughing but also trying to shoo them away. Give us some privacy, will you? Nate laughed, adding, Well, you better hurry, someone's coming soon, and they probably don't want to walk in on this scene. Jeannie gasped, realizing she was still in her boots, and quickly asked them to leave so she could get dressed. They left the room, laughing together as they walked out. Jeannie hurried to clean up, rushing into the bathroom. I can't believe this, she said, laughing to herself as she washed off and got ready. Tim, feeling much more relaxed now, stretched and casually pulled on his shirt. He joined Nate and Linda in the living room, where they all sat at the table, grinning like they had just shared a big inside joke. Soon, the sound of the shower turning off echoed from the bathroom, and they could hear Jeannie moving around as she finished getting ready. The mood was light, filled with laughter and the comfortable camaraderie of close friends. She came out of the bathroom and headed to the bedroom, but stopped in surprise when she saw her dad. She was fully dressed and looked nice, though her cheeks were a bit pink, and she seemed a little flustered. She looked at the table for a moment, giving everyone a chance to smile. Finally, she relaxed, lowered her hands, lifted her chin confidently, and walked over to them. Why are you showering in the middle of the day, Jeannie? Asked Linda with a playful grin. I felt hot and needed to cool off, Jeannie replied firmly. I can imagine, Nate laughed, which made the others join in. Kitten, should I start calling you Wild Kitten? Joe teased. Linda says even a pillow can't quiet you down. Really, Dad? Jeannie frowned with her mouth scrunched up. Is even my own father joking about me now? Hey, I wasn't making fun, Linda said quickly. I was just a little jealous. It sounds like you had a lot of fun. Jeannie winked at Tim and then sat in his lap. She gave him a quick kiss before turning back to Linda. Let's just say I've never had more fun. Being with Tim is a really amazing experience. Her dad covered his ears. Tim smiled widely. Nate laughed, and Linda, with a playful glint in her eye, mentioned, I wouldn't know about that, but his brother sure knows how to have a good time. It must run in the family. Everyone was enjoying themselves, joking and chatting, until the new phone rang. After a short call, Tim spoke seriously. Well, I guess we can't put this off any longer. A pickup with Rogers, Slaughter, Barnes, Hughes, and Benton left Lake Travis at noon. We don't know their exact route, but since they didn't go east, they'll probably head down 281 or take back roads. They plan to meet in San Antonio with a van from Del Rio, another from Seguin, and one already in San Antonio. We should expect them in the county around 5 p.m. I doubt they will come straight here, but we need to spread the word to be ready if they arrive during the day. I don't think they'll come until it's dark, likely closer to 8, but we have a few last-minute things to handle. Nate, should we call? Or are we all set? Let's call to confirm, but we should be fine either way, Nate answered. Joe, Jeannie, and Linda headed to Mendez's house to share the news in person. Tim and Nate went to the oil storage tanks on the hillside, attached the hose to the valve, laid it out all the way to the creek, and connected everything. All that was left was to open the valve and turn on the pump at the well. They checked each spot to make sure everything was set up properly and looked over the lights on both sides. Everything seemed fine, so they drove to the shed. The sheriff arrived just before them and greeted them as the Kelly Boys. He walked over to a group of men sitting on hay bales, chairs, and benches, carrying a canvas bag, which he placed on a table. He greeted each man by name and then casually spoke to the group. It's great to see Jose and Jesse relaxing on their days off. They mentioned you guys were going wild hog hunting tonight and might go fishing tomorrow after you process the pigs. Sounds like a good time. And I wish I could join you, but work keeps me busy. Looking at Tim, he added, You're even more alone out here than usual. I got your neighbors to head into town for a couple of days. I doubt I'll have much luck with Dora, Daniel, and the others, but we heard today about a group of 5 criminals wanted in the Austin area for some serious charges. They claim they have teamed up with a new gang. They call themselves Los Angeles del Diablo now, but they've been around for a while. They used to cause trouble in this county a few years back before moving on. Now they claim parts of the counties near US 90 west of San Antonio and the Del Rio area. They are known to deal in illegal drugs and human trafficking, and they also make questionable films. The 5 criminals may be working with the Devil's Angels, but we aren't sure how or why they teamed up. This is just a rumor for now, but an informant tells us they plan to hunt down a man and kidnap a woman in our county. The man is said to be the leader of a rival gang they are feuding with, and the woman is the ex-wife of one of the criminals. Los Angeles thinks if they succeed, they can regain power in these counties, buy off or scare the law enforcement, and improve their smuggling routes. Getting rid of law enforcement won't happen, but local sheriffs agree that if we deal with this quickly, everyone here will be safer. We are doing patrols and have secret watchers along county roads, and we are moving some people who are alone into town until this situation calms down. As I said, all the neighbors around here are already in town, so that just leaves you guys. He paused, acknowledging the 5 women who had just arrived and were listening. And ladies out here. I know most of you have homes in town or people you can stay with if you want to be safe. Is anyone ready to head into town? Nobody moved, so he went on. I didn't think so, so I brought some advanced handheld radios. You can use them to talk if you see someone. They're set to a frequency that no one else can hear, so you can communicate among yourselves. If you need to reach us, one of the deputies can help you with the right frequency. He scanned the group and joked, No drinking beer today? That's probably for the best. Mixing drinking with hunting could lead to mistakes and accidents. It's also good that you have a couple of nurses with you for any unexpected issues. He nodded to the men, tipped his hat to the women, and said, Well, I need to get back to work. Gentlemen and ladies, take care. The sheriff opened the door to his vehicle, paused for a moment with a grin and said, "I almost hope those troublemakers show up. I've heard tales about the Pandilla Tasajillo and Los Ratones de la Brasada. They might not be pleased to see you all planning to take over their area. If they do take action, I'm betting on them. Stay safe, look out for each other, and remember to duck if anyone fires a shot at you instead of a hog." By 5 o'clock, the serving table was filled with everything needed for soft tacos, and the coolers were packed with soft drinks. The group had grown to 48 men, with a dozen women around. They ate, chatted, reviewed their plans, and then split into 6 teams to discuss their roles. The women set up several cots and opened 2 boxes of medical supplies. By 6 o'clock, half of Los Ratones moved out toward the south side of the ranch, while the other half was driven north in trucks. Tim, Jeannie, and Joe took their vehicle to the gate, where a small bulldozer was parked. A large sign there read, "No trespassing intruders will be prosecuted. Armed intruders will be killed." A new banner next to it asked in both English and Spanish, "Do you believe in heaven and hell? If you go past this sign, you will find out for sure." Tim could see the tops of portable light towers, but knew they would be hidden if you entered at night. When they reached the small creek before the hill where the ranch house stood, they noticed a mix of water and oil slowly flowing downstream toward a dam to the south. The dam held water back all the way to the northern edge of the property, creating a raised road with a large pipe beneath it. "It's all ready," Joe said. "We've done our planning and preparation, and we're as set as we can be before things get started. You know the saying, 'Men plan, the gods laugh'? That's why we've looked at so many options, even though we feel confident we can stick to our main plan. Now we just have to see what happens and adapt. No matter what occurs, Tim, our top priority is Jeannie, then our team, and then ourselves. Now you both need to change into clothes that you are okay with losing, just in case we need to burn them." Tim nodded, and Jeannie hugged his arm tighter, looking worried. Waiting was hard, but the radios helped them manage last-minute questions and problems. As the night fell, countless stars came out in the dark sky. The night sky in South Texas was clear, just like it was for the early explorers. You could see stars and parts of the Milky Way that most people do not get to see. While West Texas is great for stargazing, brush country comes in next. Tim, Joe, and Jeannie sat in wooden chairs around the fire pit. They looked up and talked about the constellations and wonders above them. They chose not to light a fire so they wouldn't lose their night vision, but they enjoyed the cool night air. Suddenly, the radio crackled, alerting them that the sheriff's department had spotted 4 vehicles on the nearby farm road, about 15 minutes away. Everyone felt ready. They offered a quick prayer and kept chatting, although they felt a little more anxious. They spotted headlights on the road as the vehicles turned towards the ranch entrance. The cars paused at the entrance, cutting a chain and talking for a moment before continuing on. Then the lights vanished as they went down into the creek area. Joe picked up his rifle and some extra magazines, moving to his lookout spot behind a mound of dirt south of the house. He had a good view of anyone coming from the east, where the entrance road was, while the west was less likely since it would take a long walk through the bushes. Tim and Jeannie went inside and turned on some lights. Tim turned on the microphone and connected the speakers outside. In his strongest voice, he repeated the warning that was posted at the gate in Spanish. "Warning! If you enter without permission, you will not leave." After a moment, he said it again in English. Jeannie pressed play, and the echoing sound of the Deguelo music flowed across the ranch. The newcomers wouldn't know what it meant, but others would understand. No mercy. The bugles and drums played the music that once echoed at the Alamo, while the darkness began to shift. A glow rose from the creek, which Daniel and Chai had set on fire. The light towers around the area, where the intruders had been drawn in, lit up, brightening the surroundings and the men moving in the darkness. Some of the intruders shot at the light towers, but this brought a quick response from the nearest defense positions. The vehicle at the back exploded, blocking any chance of escape down the road. Some attackers fell as gunfire hit them, others ran toward the house on the hill, only to face more gunfire from the nearby positions to the north and west. A few tried to retreat, but the Ratones had surrounded them from behind and were shooting from the sides, pushing the remaining ones into the area that had become a battlefield. More and more attackers fell as the shooting from both sides grew fiercer. 3 of them got past the last line of defense and rushed toward the house, firing at the shadows they could see through the windows. A single shot rang out, and 1 fell. The other 2 kept running and shooting at the house. They got through the fence easily. 1 ran toward the front door while the other went around to the back. Larry Barnes burst through the front door and saw Jeannie standing in the doorway of the bedroom. His rifle was aimed at her as he moved closer. "You worthless person! I'm going to hurt you badly and sell you!" Jeannie shouted back. "No, you aren't! You'll pay for this!" Larry paused when she revealed a shotgun hidden behind the wall. He aimed his rifle at her, but Jeannie shot first. A large, bloody hole appeared in his side, and the rifle fell from his hands as he collapsed onto the floor, pain and shock on his face. The back door crashed open, and J.W. came in with his rifle raised, looking for a target. He saw Larry, jumped into the room, and turned to his right. Tim stepped from behind the door and struck J.W.'s arm with a machete, causing him to scream and drop his weapon. Tim then hit J.W. again, knocking him down to the table where he lay in a daze, blood dripping from his face. The rifle fell to the floor, and Tim kicked it away. He then used the machete to cut J.W.'s other arm before placing the blade on J.W.'s belt and between his legs. Looking into J.W.'s frightened eyes, Tim said, "You are to blame for all this. You had to charm every woman around, married or not. The ones you couldn't charm, you took advantage of and bragged about it. You recorded everything to blackmail them later and to show off to your friends. You invited those who would support your actions. You found a group involved in illegal activities who were foolish enough to buy your low-quality films, featuring people who were not in great shape, and to buy the women you decided to leave behind. You are fully responsible for what happened to your friends tonight, and for what is about to happen to you." Tim swung the machete down swiftly, cutting J.W.'s pants, causing him to cry out in pain and fear. He begged for mercy, but found none in the eyes of the man he betrayed. "I will show you the same mercy you gave to Jeannie, Dana, Carla, Jennifer, and the others, none. You will scream, beg, and cry, and at some point you will wish for the end, but I will keep you alive and suffering for as long as I can. I want you to arrive in your last place wearing the face of pain," Tim said as he cut deep into J.W.'s thigh, causing blood to flow. "Don't get worked up. It hurts now, but it will take time for you to bleed out. By then, it will be just one of your problems." He pressed the machete into J.W.'s other leg, pulling it slowly, leading to another scream. "Tell me, what made you think turning my wife into a performer was a good idea? You used to live in South Texas. Didn't you hear the stories?" "No, I swear, if I had known you were involved, I would have stayed away from her. By the time I found out, it was too late, and we thought we had to act first," J.W. said, pleading. Tim glanced at Jeannie, who was holding her shotgun steady on Larry, who was looking at her with weakness. He saw no compassion on her face, but still pleaded. She replied coldly, "What compassion did you show me when you hurt me? The last time you caused me serious injuries and didn't help me at all. Now, Larry, you know how I felt. The truth is, no one will come to save you like Tim did for me. No one will care for you, help you heal, or make you stronger. Instead, you will die here, and your body will be lost somewhere far away while you face consequences forever. Jeannie, go outside and call your dad. We need to check on him and see how everyone else is." She opened the door and called for him, only to hear J.W. yell in pain again, his face injured and bleeding. Joe took Jeannie in his arms, making sure she was okay, then told her to stay outside and take a breath. He went inside and heard another loud scream. J.W.'s pants were cut, and he was bleeding. Joe spoke to Tim and then gently touched his arm, which was holding the machete. "We need some answers, Tim, and he can help us. Please step outside for a moment. Jeannie needs you." Tim looked at Joe, nodded, and stepped outside to embrace Jeannie. He could hear Joe talking to Rogers, saying they needed him to be honest, but he would let Tim take over if he didn't. Nate's truck arrived, and he, Daniel, Chewy, Jesse, and Jose got out, while Chivo climbed out of the back. He said, "We have one more for you, Teo. The guy was hiding and acting scared, so don't bring him inside." Tim looked at Barry Benton all tied up. He turned to Chivo and Nate. "Drive back to the hoist where we prepared deer and hogs. We'll lift him, clean him up, and take his clothes off. Then we'll see if he shares what we need to know." Joe was talking to JW, but I might have been too rough too quickly. Let Chivo handle this. He's good with a knife. Tim then asked Chuy and Daniel, "Is everyone okay?" They both smiled. Choi replied, "Just some scratches on our side, but the others lost most of their team except for this guy and 3 others who were hurt." "What happened here? You didn't want to let those 3 go, but you insisted. But it looks like you, Jeannie, and Joe are unharmed." Jeannie came up beside him, put her arm around him, and said, "We're good. Larry is hurt badly, and Rogers is in a bad spot, too. I almost finished Larry, and Tim was working on Rogers." Chai, Daniel, and Nate looked at her and then Tim closely. Jeannie continued without showing any fear. "I know you're worried about me, but I'm fine. We tried to do the right thing. I reported the abuse, and Tim went to court for custody of the kids. We laid out our cases, and the court agreed. But Karen teamed up with those 7 guys to get rid of Tim and take their sons, and tonight it all ended here. My question now is, what do we do next?" "Now we clean up," Jesse said as he approached. "The cleanup team is coming. I'll be in charge. They're loading the truck pieces onto a flatbed as we speak, moving bodies onto another, and collecting weapons and anything else. Their things will be buried with them. We'll decide what to do with the vans after I talk to Tim. What will you do with the person you have up there?" "We'll find out everything we can. If he tells us what we want to know, we will decide what to do next. If he doesn't, he won't be with us much longer," Tim replied. 2 groups of vehicle lights appeared on the road from the barn. 4 women got out of each vehicle. The cleanup crew went straight inside to get supplies, while the 2 nurses checked on Tim and Jeannie, then went inside to see Joe. A short while later, Joe called for help. Chi and Daniel brought Rogers outside, clearly upset. He was covered in cuts, and Joe said, "I don't think he knows anything else, so Tim, he's yours." Tim grabbed him by his curly black hair and started dragging him toward the hoist. He screamed and struggled but couldn't fight back. Daniel and Chuy lifted him off the ground. His cries grew louder. They dropped him in front of the hoist, where other tasks had been done. Chivo shined a light on the new arrival. "You see that? That's how you'll end up in 15 minutes unless you tell us what you know. We want names, roles, and where everyone else is." Tim felt satisfied seeing the fear on Rogers' face. "Take your time with this, but make sure he tells us everything. I haven't decided yet whether to let them go or make sure they can't talk again, so keep them alive if you can. But if they don't cooperate, make sure it's over for them in the worst way." 2 hours later, the place was clean, though it smelled of bleach. Jeannie and Tim had blood on them and went to clean up. They changed clothes and tossed their old clothes into the burn pile. The remains of JW's pickup were gone, along with all the other evidence. Neither Rogers nor Benton made it through questioning, but both shared a lot of information for the recorder. Ranger Boyd would want to know about the others involved. The 2 deputies talked to someone, and soon all 3 vans left with the remaining members. Jeannie and Tim stayed outside, letting the work crews finish their jobs. Everyone else was gone except Joe. The 3 of them built a small fire and sat around it. They didn't need to speak much. The silence felt good. By midnight, the fire had burned low, and so had their energy. They each went to bed, surprised at how quickly sleep found them. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to Infidelity Plus to stay updated with more captivating tales of infidelity and payback. Turn on notifications so you're the first to see our latest content.